Did you hear about the laws that being passed about the abortion stuff?
The laws.
In the South, they what state was it? There's been some states that have been passing laws that outlaws
Alabama,
abortion.
Georgia,
Alabama, Georgia.
I think Louisiana. Louisiana, I think it's after 6 weeks, but
The heartbeat one.
yeah.
And then Illinois passed a law that said, as a I guess a proactive measure, that said if a woman's fundamental right, Illinois passed a law, basically kind of in the opposite direction. And you guys heard about that. It reminds me of, I mean, there's different opinions on why that's been happening kind of all of a sudden. But I was thinking about how, this is something I've been thinking a long time, is that the issue of abortion really mirrors, in terms of the dynamics of it, it mirrors like the slavery issue. In that it concerns, there's one side that thinks there's a fundamental human rights violation, and then there's the other side that says it absolutely is not one. In fact, there's another violation, maybe it's not a human rights violation, if you take away the practice, the practice of abortion versus the practice of slavery. And because there's a claim about a human rights violation, there is no middle ground. So like if you were an abolitionist and the person were to say to you, well, if you don't like slavery, then don't own slaves, like they like, you missed the point, right? Or if you say, well, it's up to the states, it's like, again, you missed the point. It's like if you view it as a human rights violation, there is no room for compromise, because you'd be asking them to compromise on a human rights violation.
Yeah.
So it's like literally anything less than a human rights violation, you can probably find compromise. But when somebody thinks there's not a civil rights violation, but a human rights violation, you can't compromise. So what I think is the parallel that I see, the reason why there's a parallel is because in both issues, it seems like the identity, it was an issue of identity in terms of what is a human being and what are rights of a human being. I feel like those are the core issues, and it boils down to like, what is the worldview of a given person, because that really defines what you think constitutes a human being and what you think are the rights of a human being. So like with the slavery issue, we're so far removed from it, we kind of take it for granted and we say, oh, if you are pro-slavery, you must be some racist, ignorant hillbilly. That's our perception of racism today, only the ignorant hillbilly. But in that time, when slavery was being practiced, that was the mainstream scientific view, that African peoples were inferior.
So actually, I wanted to speak on when you said most people think that it's a hillbilly. Are you, from whose perspective would you say most people are thinking that?
I guess it would definitely be the North. Anyone who's not a hillbilly.
Okay. And then would you say it's even, because I'm thinking that it seems like that would be coming from probably predominantly white culture that would think that, oh, a racist bigot is some hillbilly,
Yeah.
ignorant person, uneducated person. I don't think that that's coming from those who are being affected by racism. I don't think that they think, you know what I mean?
That's very true. That's very true. It's coming from a certain perspective. So but if you look at back when slavery was practiced, the leading scientists of the day were saying in scientific peer-reviewed journals that African people were either subhuman or somehow inherently inferior on a biological level. What that means is that if you were to challenge the idea that Africans were equal to, say, whites or Europeans, that would be like today challenging the theory of evolution. You're challenging a mainstream, well-established view. And it's okay, you can do that, but you don't expect to have a lot of buy-in, especially when the basis of your belief that human beings are equal is coming from religion. That actually almost more, it's like, well, we're all made in the image of God. But you're at a time where people are challenging the very existence of God more than ever. So you almost have a science versus religion in the context of the the slavery debate. And ironically, you have kind of the same thing in the abortion debate. But what's a parallel is that bottom line, what constitutes a human being? So even if we don't come to an agreement on that, like, how does your worldview shape what constitutes a human being and the rights of a human being? How does your worldview shape that? That to me is kind of, I think both in the past, people were talking right past each other when the slavery debate was going on. And I think the same thing's happening today in regards to the abortion discussions, that people are talking right past each other, is because we're not understanding the worldview that people hold and how that shapes what they believe constitutes a human being or even the rights of a human being. Mm-hmm. So I see that as a really strong, and this is one thing I think is super important. There was never a consensus on the issue of slavery. It took a war to end slavery. It wasn't like the one side over time convinced the other side. There was never an agreement. It took a war to basically end the practice. And then basically their hands were forced. So whether their beliefs changed or not, they had to play ball.
Yeah.
And so I feel like when it comes to the abortion, I mean, these laws are being passed, right?
Yeah.
There's countermeasures. It's a deeply heated issue. Is there any hope that the one side over time will be able to convince the other? And I think it's basically that boils down to, can you change someone else's worldview? Can you change what they fundamentally think is a human being, or can you change what somebody fundamentally thinks is the rights of a human being? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's possible. I don't think any human being has ever fully arrived. So even when you think you're at your final destination of thought or of growth, I think that anything can come along and change that or show you otherwise. So
Why do you think that?
whereas, like, I mean, we have, hillbillies or racists in the South or people who were in the Klan who are now, people who are advocates for Black Lives Matter or for, you know what I mean? So
You're saying they could go back though, because when you said no matter how far along in your thought process and thought journey, if you can make a 180. Is that
I think you can. Yeah, I think you can with enough information. I think, or the willingness to, because you can show someone right from wrong all day, and they can know that it's wrong. But if they're unwilling to do, what's right, then
Well, I think that's almost. Well,
yeah.
Let me think about that.
Well, getting it to behavior.
Yeah.
Just like
behavior.
right.
Yeah.
Like if a behavior change versus, as people would say, a heart change.
Mm-hmm.
Like, did the person's intentions, what they actually hold as important, priority for themselves, has that changed? Their desire, has that changed?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it just going through the motions of behavior? And you're just doing a certain code of conduct, so to speak, just to be able to get what you need or want. And
Be socially acceptable.
to be, there you go, socially acceptable. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
I think, like we were just talking about, hillbillies, but I keep saying it, but I'm trying to think of other words other ways to, because hillbillies just aren't Southerners. These people, I think these can be, I think society defines that as anyone from a rural community who hillbilly could be anything, but I think society would say, oh, it's someone from a rural community who who lacks education or is one-sided, doesn't even try to, see the world from anyone else's perspective. It's just that, even when they recognize that something is like, oh, that might be right, but I'm just going to argue against it for the sake of it, so I think, we're talking about
a hillbilly mentality.
It's almost like when people talk about identity politics, it's almost like being sometimes like a sophisticated hillbilly. I mean, in the spirit of what you're saying.
I get what you're saying.
In terms of saying, like, I intentionally live in this bubble of information, you know, depending upon your news source that you choose, or how even your search engine will tailor its results to what it thinks is your political and cultural bias. You know, it's almost like we're creating not hillbillies, quote unquote, but just these bubbles that we used to think was kind of, the bubbles were created due to geography. You know, you're in an isolated community, so you just, it is what it is, right? But now it's like, well, now you create these virtual bubbles. You know, with technology, you have the ability to have those echo chambers.
Yeah.
You know, and so now it's like, oh my gosh, I mean, I kind of see it definitely happening in regards to a lot of things, not just abortion. It's just something that's come up recently, but those echo chambers. You said, Frank, that a person can go 180. Have you experienced a 180 on anything of substance? Like, did it? Have you experienced like a change in your worldview that made you take a 180 on an issue or on
I'd say, yeah. I think growing up as a Southerner, there's, you know, I could have very much been a hillbilly. You know, I could have been a black hillbilly. You know what I mean? But, you know, and one might say, well, you had, you know, tendencies, or you had, you know, you did think like this. And so, to answer your question, I think there were things that I grew up knowing or thinking that I knew for sure. You know, like, I'm absolutely sure about, you know, I've arrived at this thought process when it comes to homosexuality or the LGBT community, or I've arrived at, maybe interracial dating, or I've arrived at, you know what I mean? And a lot of this wasn't even my own thinking. It might have just been what was around me, that thinking. And so, but I think you have to be intentional about, about stepping outside of your own worldview and being like, okay, well, there's so much world out here. This can't possibly be the only lens, the only perspective. And so, especially when you realize that there are other religions out there outside of Christianity, even when it comes to what's the religion that I'm thinking of that is constantly demonized in the media?
not Islam?
Islam.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So like even Islam, growing up, you would have thought that everybody who, believed Allah was their savior, or who read the Quran thought the same way, or everyone was the same. We would just paint people with a broad, stroke. And again, these weren't thinkings that I taught myself, nor did my parents teach me, but there was just a lot of that around me. And so it was hard. It's easy to become ignorant of stuff, you know what I mean? And I think you have to be intentional about like, hey, what's really going on? Or leaving, finding comfort in discomfort, going and sitting at a table of people who don't look like you, or you might be the minority, and hearing their story, hearing where they're from, and or picking up a book, I believe Christ is my savior, but does that mean that I can't pick up a Quran for deeper understanding, to try to be able to fellowship into, because I want to understand and grow closer with my brothers and sisters who are Muslims, you know what I mean? Does that? So yeah.
See, that goes back to identity. Like when you say, like, one of the things that, and I was saying the mainstream, maybe Christian view is that they say those aren't your brothers and sisters. That's why within church they'll say your brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yeah.
Right? They're specific to say spiritually those aren't your brothers and sisters. Some would say, well, they're my brothers and sisters as a human being.
But if they're
in terms of humanity, which is a different view, not saying. Not passing any judgment, making any value or moral judgment, but just saying there's those different perspectives on, and it boils down to identity. When I look at worldview, I think of three things that need to be crystal clear for oneself, and if at all possible when sharing with others, is how does your worldview, well, first of all, what is it? How does it shape your identity? How does it shape your personal value? And how does it shape your personal purpose? Because that's where we disagree on, in my opinion. Like, the reason why we see other people as literally less than human or subhuman is because of the nature and the basis of their identity. That's like first and foremost. And then based upon the identity is the value. And then it's the purpose. So in other words, I see this, like, what is this? Is this gold or is this a bottle of water? Right? That's the identity question. Well, based upon the identity, I'm saying how much this is worth. Is this worth $1? Or is this worth its literal weight in gold?
Yeah.
So when we have different understanding of identity as shaped by worldview, that determines the value. And so when we're talking about, this idea of all being equal, that's actually a rather a Judeo-Christian. It's not exclusive to the Judeo-Christian faiths, the Abrahamic faiths. But if you look at Hinduism, Hinduism would say, no. Not everybody's equal value. They have the caste system. Depending on what caste you're in, that determines your value. In a previous life, you were a jerk. And so your payment in the next life is that you were born as someone in a lower caste, literally. So it doesn't make sense to treat the poor man equal to the rich man, because the reason why the poor man is where he is because in the past life he may have been rich, but he was a jerk, so now he's been reborn as a poor man. It's like, whoa, what do you do with that? So when you say that, for those who are coming from a standpoint of we're all of equal value, or even that we're the same type of being, it's like, no, there's a lot of Hindus. There's a lot, even if they're not Hindus officially, there's a lot of people who believe it. And it comes out by the way they look at people who are different along any dimension, whether it's race, creed, political, gender, just everything, class.
Socioeconomic.
It's like, so we treat it like, it's a no-brainer, we're all equal. Actually, that's an extremely difficult concept to wrap your head around. And especially what Frank was saying is like, well, depending upon what you're rooted in, you can go 180 almost not on a dime, but if you get the right information, interpret it in the right way, you could make a 180.
But you could also have the right information and distort it, because these same people that, enslaved not just us, but, millions of other people, they had the Bible right in front of them. And, I'm pretty sure that our Savior doesn't justify the enslavement of...
But you know what they said? I know you've heard of the Hamitic curse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they interpret the Bible to say, well, the Bible does have God cursing certain groups of people. Esau was cursed. He ended up doing well for himself over time. But they can say, well, that curse is real. And so these African peoples are under a curse, according to the Bible, so no harm done.
But how would...
You know what I'm saying?
Well,
I'm not saying I agree with that.
But that's what I'm saying.
But that to me proves what Frank's saying. Taking what the Bible says, if you're saying that that's an authoritative text, the living word, and then you're interpreting it, using that information and interpreting it as such, or justifying, picking and choosing, and then justifying your actions based upon, out of context, or well, that's what that meant.
But who understands the Bible in its entirety to avoid that?
But if you intentionally distort this is why so many people have issues with Christians or Christianity. We pick and choose what it's like. We'll willingly quote scripture and apply it to someone else's life while ignoring what it says right below it, because it's speaking directly to what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so, I guess.
And I feel people do the same with science, right? So you can pick any authority that you want, and they'll pick and choose scientific facts that fits their narrative. And I think that sometimes even in you can do that internally, effectively as a self-deception. When you're picking and choosing, and regardless of what you're acknowledging as an authority. I think you can do that even with logic and reasoning. You can be very rational about certain aspects of life, but not all. you know, and that may change the story very much when you're rational about everything in terms of economics, politics, social, right, environment. When you take it all into account, you may have a different understanding than if you were to neglect economics or if you were to neglect social. So I feel like, yeah, identity, value, and purpose.
Well, do you think that people are looking at it from a holistic standpoint, big picture, holistic context of themselves, and then when we're talking about a human being, what constitutes a human being, are they looking at it from an individualistic standpoint or perspective versus like, you know, holistically, like everybody, where do I fit amongst everybody else? And that's not just like present time, that's the past, present,
Where do you fit in
and
history?
future, right? So that's through time, throughout time, right? So I'm just wondering too, like even from that standpoint of worldview and talking about identity, value, purpose, is it a holistic standpoint? Because I would say, like just what you were saying about logic and like picking and choosing, we can be very rational about some things, like, you know, but like for instance, when people get into relationships and stuff, it's like that goes out the window. Like, you know, rationality is all about feeling and emotion and all that.
For a reason, it's before you get in the relationship.
Yeah,
Well, I shouldn't
uh-oh.
say that. It'll be during, but you have to prep yourself for a relationship because you have to vet them.
Yeah.
You gotta vet them, and you gotta use reason. You have to probably employ the help of your friends who will help you to think straight. You know, and then family and friends, and so and whoever you trust. And if they, you know, vet them and say looks like a good thing, then it would be reasonable to trust, because the trust means you're actually suspending reason to a degree. You know, because you're not going to be able to control yourself to a degree. So you have to be discerning and make a decision. And even when it comes to not even romantic relationships, it's just, I feel like there's so much manipulation when it comes to people of different worldviews. Like, I feel like we, as human beings, we really struggle to communicate with people of different worldviews. And I feel like we don't address it head on. It seems, in my view, that our answer to diversity is adopt my worldview. And it's like, if you think about it, is there really another way? Meaning, even if you say two people, one worldview says be as tolerant as you could possibly be. Another worldview says don't be as tolerant as you could possibly be, dominate. Whether violently or peacefully, make it your goal to dominate. Those are two fundamentally different worldviews, right? So even when people say, well, be as tolerant as you possibly be, you kind of need people to adopt that worldview for it to work. Because if you have another group of people who are going to just steamroll over you, either violently or peacefully, in terms of physical violence, then that's just what they're going to do.
Yeah.
You would not be able to defend yourself against such people. But we're just kind of just describing human history. That's why it's so important. I'm saying, like, when it comes to the slavery issue, like, they never came to an agreement. They were forced to play ball. They were forced to acknowledge that these are, well, in theory, full citizens, right? Because then you have the civil rights movement to say, well, we need real full rights,
Right.
you know? So even that was with a caveat, but this is something that I think we don't like to address, because the kumbaya, let's all hold hands, it ain't working.
But I don't think, I mean, what's to say that they did adopt that worldview? I mean, you can still live in the world but not live by its rules or its beliefs, you know, or system.
How do you
You can coexist without believing the same.
But they're creating a system, like the opposition is creating a system that's well suited for their belief.
But that system's not everywhere, because there's people. We'll go back to the South. There's people, there are areas in the South where, like, white people have not seen black people outside of just other than being on TV. So that is their worldview of us.
Okay, sure.
And not as many. I wouldn't say it's as many black people that are the same. Because white people outnumber us, so more black people have seen white people. But I've literally bumped into white people, in like deep parts of Mississippi or rural parts of Alabama, who are like, "Yo, I didn't go to school. I didn't see a black person until I was in high school, or I didn't see a black person until I was in college." You know what I mean? So, I think the system that you were talking about, I think even it won't. Like, I don't know. I feel like they're like, I don't know. They're like boundaries or perimeters to it, but like, you know. Whereas even they'll be like, oh, well, this is our half, and this is, you know, we'll let you have that half. You know what I mean? But as far as up here, if you come up here, this is the way that we kind of live. This is the way that, you know, you may not adopt our, you know, our worldview, but understand if you do live in these areas or you visit these areas, this is how we live. So it's like very interesting, and it's still pretty strange though that some parts of our country just don't. There's basically zero diversity of not just you know gender and ethnicity, but also of thought. So
that's almost probably the most important.
Yeah. So. Yeah, so it's interesting.
I'm gonna go back.
Yeah,
I don't think we addressed it. Which, granted, the human race I think hasn't addressed it, is that your worldview defines the rules of engagement when you're interacting with those who don't share it, and I think we don't. Well, I guess we can speak for ourselves individually. Is that like how do you manage the fact that in order for you to succeed, in order for you to live, you need to have influence. You need to have control. And so everyone of the same ideology, I think that transcends everything. Everyone who share the same ideology or worldview, they're actively trying to shape their world to match their worldview. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, is there any, I don't know if an example is not the case.
I would say either consciously or subconsciously that they're doing that. I don't think people are necessarily even aware that they're trying to control their environment and themselves, but on some level, yeah, it's definitely going on. So you're asking how
yes,
to kind of...
Well, I mean, so I know, okay, I feel people just aren't honest with that. Like when we talk to somebody who has another worldview, we're not honest about the fact that I am trying to expand my influence. If you are part of that, that's great. If you're not, I have a policy for how to engage with you, and that may or may not be acceptable to you, but that's what's going to happen. It especially seems like in America we have this fantasy that we're pretending like we're all on the same team, and we're not.
Do you think?
And I'm talking about on racial lines. I'm talking about on in terms of I mean, Frank, you mentioned it, like the LGBT versus those who aren't of the LGBT community. Like, it's on that dimension. It's on the political dimension, if you want to say conservative, liberal / libertarian / socialist, or whatever you want to call it. On every dimension, that's what's happening, and we pretend. It's almost like it's almost like pretending that these are compatible systems or compatible ways of being, or ways of thinking, and they're not. So it's almost like saying, are we? It's almost like someone trying to pull a fast one on us to get us to follow rules of engagement that are peaceful when they have no intention of reciprocating. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like saying, we're going to have a sports competition. You guys make sure you follow the rules, even though the other team has no intention of following the rules, because they know that's going to allow them to win.
Well, who's the other team?
Anyone who doesn't hold to your ideology. Anyone who is not part of your worldview. So if you're a Christian, it's not Christians. If you're on the dimension of politics, if you're conservatives, non-conservatives. You know, if you're on the dimension of gender / sexual identity, you know, if you're what would be straight, cisgendered, roughly
Gender
speaking.
fluid.
Well, versus those who aren't straight. Okay, they're incompatible systems. There's incompatible ways of thought, and everyone is seeking to mold their environment to be well compatible with it. It's like almost like tearing down a building and rebuilding another one exactly the way you want it to be. It's like, well, there are already residents in that building.
So what do you mean by, you said, I think you were saying, it's almost like we want to believe we all live in this, or we are all on the same page. What is that illusion what is this? I'm trying to identify or think of what you mean by that.
The notion of tolerance, that it's possible.
So you believe
Over
it's
time.
not possible.
It's not possible. Certain worldviews can have a higher level of tolerance than others.
You mean it's not possible without war? Because war
No,
can make
it's possible. You can,
that's
if you're intelligent enough, you can avoid physical violence, but the result will be the same. So, I guess maybe, social justice warriors, or political correctness and what they call PC culture.
Mm-hmm.
That's an excellent example. Hardly nobody's getting any sort of physical violence. Yes, there's some stuff here and there, by and large, no. But they've been extremely successful in changing the way ordinary people talk in ordinary conversation. Years ago, 20 years ago, we were not nearly as PC in everyday conversation as in the past. I mean, than we are today. So they have those parties that are pushing PC culture have succeeded, but without really any violence.
there's
to
been no
speak of.
resistance.
True, right? But then they've been very manipulative to prevent that resistance, right? Any sort of disagreement makes you automatically hateful and ignorant and intolerant. I'll give you a perfect example, in my opinion. I would say if you express any sort of disagreement with the homosexual lifestyle, in any shape or form, you are automatically called a homophobic. Now, when you
Any?
say yes, any.
I don't
Okay.
agree with that, but okay.
Okay, I'll speak from my experience, and
So when
You
you
can-
saying any part of the lifestyle, or you're saying
Like you can't critique that community at all without
not the community, the lifestyle.
The
Because the
lifestyle.
community is
Just-
doing all kinds of
just
things
be-
throughout within, integrated into society. But anything that specifically is unique to that specific lifestyle.
Mhm.
Any critique of that is regularly, I can't say 100%, normally and regularly considered a homophobic view.
Mhm.
And so when you say homophobic, that is a pejorative. Okay, it's meant to be insulting. When you say phobic, that has a very specific meaning. A phobia is an irrational fear.
Fear.
What they're really saying is that your thinking is irrational, and it's not due to ignorance, it's due to fear. Okay, so you have an irrational fear, and the insinuation is that, well, people who have phobias, to the extent that they cause harm to other people, they should be in an institution. So it's a very insulting and a very aggressive, I guess passive aggressive way of saying, if you have any viewpoint that is not acceptable to the LGBT movement, and I'm going to differentiate between the LGBT movement and the LGBT community, any sort of thought that is not in line with the mainstream LGBT movement is categorically described in the mainstream as homophobic, a homophobic view or a homophobic person. So out the gate, we're saying, whoa, so instead of having a conversation about this, we're automatically calling people, saying that they have an irrational fear, basically a mental illness. That's the response. And you have to understand that homophobia, that word was made up. It was not in our vocabulary. It was created. And so now we have transphobic, right? because that's kind of the primary thing right now. So that to me is that type of manipulative language. And you said there's no resistance. Well, it's an excuse at the end of the day. There is a way to resist it, but for people who are not very articulate and they know what they think and they know what they feel, but they may not be very good with words, they're intimidated by that, and so they learn to be silent. They choose to be silent, which is to a detriment to society, because now we're not having a conversation. And in 2019, this is still the mainstream practice. I'm not saying 100% people do this, but think about it. If you were in a conversation and you heard somebody says, you know what, I have nothing against homosexual people, but I don't approve of the lifestyle. They may not say it to their face, but when they're talking to somebody else, they'll say, yeah, I'm not homophobic. I have no problem with that lifestyle. When you even do something like that, not even when you're talking to their face, you're still advancing forward that idea that anything associated with disagreement with the lifestyle is to be labeled as homophobic in nature. Granted, they may not be understanding what they're saying, but they're participating in the transformation of conversation in the public sphere. They're participating in an attempt to be manipulative in challenging thought.
But I would also say those that I don't know. To me, it seems like that when you do have a real conversation with, I've heard other people and myself also just engage in conversation. If you do have a conversation about that, that's not what I'm about. I don't swing that way or whatever and stuff like that. But let them do them. It's them. They don't have nothing to do with me. So in that sense, I'm wondering too, are they kind of going along with the crowd or that PC culture of, well, I better not, I don't really want to rock the boat or be seen or perceived as, like you said, homophobic or a hateful person or prejudiced person, and therefore that's what I'm saying, but is it really deep down that they disagree with it, but they don't want them to make it seem like, like I said, like I'm a hateful person or a prejudiced person. Similarly, like you were saying, the parallelism with racism, I see that too. I witnessed, firsthand where white people have said in my company, and I know what's going on beyond, behind closed doors too, of just like, black, I don't understand why black people act this way, and I'm just specifying with black people for right now. I don't know why they act that way or whatever, and like, but kind of the same tone of just they don't necessarily have a problem per se with all black people, but they don't like black people. I don't know how else to say it. They don't as a whole. Again, I go with the whole. They don't like black people as a whole, but there's some that are okay.
Is that the same as saying they don't like black culture, or they don't like black people as a group?
That I don't know, because it's not broken. Again, things aren't broken down to that level, or people aren't really. I didn't ask, or I don't think people typically are like, do you mean? I don't think people get that clarification of like, what do you mean the culture, or do you mean the people? Like, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't feel like that's natural conversation, but I do see it like that, kind of similarly. Like, people are afraid to say what they really feel because of that PC culture. However, I will say the flip side, it seems, to that too is, I think you have to also be careful of just let anything and everything go. Like, just let it all hang out. Like, I feel like there's a line of being, because we talked about this, like being authentic. Being yourself.
So don't be like Trump.
I think being authentic, okay, but you know what? Is that you can improve yourself. your authentic self. And I feel like that is not, like, we're just saying, just be authentic, and leave it at that. And it's like, but shouldn't we be like evolving or maturing?
Authentic and respectful.
Yeah, I would say some sort of respecting yourself, respecting other people, and should be developing. You know, in your authenticity, there should be some sort of, I think, development with that. And I don't know that that addresses on the extreme side of the non-PC people that are just like, no, just let, anything goes. I don't agree with that. But then the PC side, it does seem like I never questioned political correctness. I just thought that was decency, civility. You know what I mean? I thought it was just a way to. I actually thought it was mostly corporate America and the media. Between corporate America and the media, I thought that was just kind of
it started
a practice. Okay,
and then it trickled into like even if we was off camera, it would trickle into our conversations, and it's like, wait, time out.
Okay.
I walk on eggshells at work. I walk on eggshells, but I don't walk on eggshells when I'm with the boys, or with my folks. When you start seeing that, you're like, time out. We don't do this. We don't like. And there is something to be said that there is a reality that sometimes people are disrespectful, and they do need to learn. Yes. Even in private conversation, we had a little, well, I won't name names, but we issue with. We were pointing out Native American versus Indian, right, to a family member, and we were like, okay, like, I didn't think we were being PC because it's like, the reason why they call these people Indian because they thought they was in India, okay, so it's like to kind of perpetuate a label based upon a literal ignorance, it just seems silly, and it's like, that I think, in my opinion, because we kind of had a little mini debate with a family member, and it was just like, really, and then it's like, it wasn't even worse. It was like it was American Indian. It's like, well, if you're gonna amend it with American Indian, just call them Native American. Like you're already amending it.
Some people are just comfortable and they want to stay.
That's what we
That's
found
what
out.
I'm saying.
That's what we found out.
Some people will have the knowledge in front of them, but they're like, but I've been doing it this way, so I'll stay this way.
Yeah.
And that's what it boiled down to.
Because I would even say arguably it was a generational thing.
Yeah, it was.
It was definitely a generational thing in America. That a certain generation and before, that they would term it those people Indians. And but then to your point, Frank, if then just and not saying you're gonna be perfect because you've been decades have been saying, but like you said, intentionality to try to Native American, okay, just, I mean,
but we're talking about, as we're talking about PC culture, like I feel like, so I feel like there's just been, and I feel like there's definitely, we used to say there's a time and a place for everything, or like, certain things are, you can still be, like you said, you could still be authentic, but also be respectful as well. And so, I don't know, like you were saying, it's like we were discussing it, like PC culture starting in media and news, television, and then kind of like spreading like wildfire. And so now it's to the point where like, like it's in comedy now, where like comedy might have considered a safe space to just say whatever you feel, and that's what people went to get their laughs, because inappropriate things were said there, and we can laugh about it knowing that someone wrote this down and they don't actually believe this, like it's funny. What makes it funnier is because this individual is saying something that we wouldn't say, or we know we're not supposed to say. And so so even that space, things are changing. And so I don't know, like I feel like I lie in the middle of like PC culture, and then like never wanting to be disrespectful, but I also believe that comedy is different from actual hate. And of course, it matters the way your delivery and how you say things, but I don't know. I just don't. I know I personally don't want to live in a world where like no one is authentic, and every time we look up, PC culture is constantly, oh well, you can't say X, Y, and Z like that. You know what I mean? Because it'll constantly, and that's what I'm saying. Like where like there has to be some type of resistance to say like, no, that word means exactly what it means, and that's how I'm going to use it. Of course, the things that are disrespectful, the things that are derogatory, the things that are racist, let's get those things out of here. But but yeah, I think that I don't know. Should there be boundaries, or should we just let PC culture continue to change everything that people say until there's nothing left that we can say?
Go ahead.
Well,
just curious.
Well, I feel like that's getting back to the human rights kind of slant, because to me that seems like a right of human beings. Do we have the right? I mean, that's going to freedom of speech, and then so many other freedoms, privileges that we have, specifically in America. But I mean, again, I feel like it's a certain decorum, or a way about conducting ourselves as we interact with the public. But I mean, that's something. I mean, that's something that can be difficult. Like, you have this face, in private, and this face in public, and what you choose to
Take the mask off.
Take the mask off, like just take it off.
Or put it back on. Put it back
on. Put it on. But whatever, is whatever you what you're presenting and stuff. And I think that people do know who they truly are. But then at the same time, I think there are some people who don't. They're confused. Like they don't, or they thought they did. Kind of like what you were saying early on in the conversation, like the people that kind of know, they may know or not know who, exactly their identity and things like that. But I think that that's something that there's certain situations or certain political climates or social climates that are going on that bring those aspects about you out that you weren't even aware of. I feel like, and it illuminates some of those things. And then you
maybe I can illuminate two.
Okay.
One where I think I have been successful, one where I have not been successful. I've noticed that back in the day, I used to, when it comes to racism, I was talking to white people, if they said something else racist or racially insensitive, I would put them on blast right there in the moment, in the context of other people. I've learned not to do that. The tendency, and I'm not even getting into why, but
You should.
white people, they shut down, they learn to comply, they don't agree with it, they just say what they say just in their circles, okay? And it's saying, what good is that? How's that helping you to grow as a human being? So what I've learned to do is I say, unless it's something like ridiculous, like using the N-word, right? Or something like that, I'll let it go. But I am also intentional to pull them aside in one-on-one, in private, and say, man, when you said that, blah, blah, okay, the way it's received, by a lot of black people is this way, and here's the reason why, and say like, so, and I try to just say as objectively as I can, and saying not say this or say that. I'll just say, look, this is how it's received, and here's the reason why. Sometimes the reason why makes sense. Sometimes the reason why it may not make sense, but at least so that you know what you're working with. If you were to express the same idea in this way, it'll at least be received. And so it could be something that's racially insensitive, which means it's not racist, but it's like folks just don't appreciate it. Sometimes it can be racist in nature. And so that's a change that I've made. I would say that's progress for me. I think that's constructive for myself and for others. When it comes to, however, I have not experienced this as a personal issue, but I can honestly say I don't know what to do if the situation come up with transgender individuals that would like you to use their pronouns, their preferred pronouns. I don't know what to do in that situation. I know the PC rule is just to comply, okay? The only issue that I have with complying is that it doesn't reflect what I genuinely believe. And I see it, if I want to acknowledge people as I genuinely see them, which I believe people have value, you know. And so if someone asks me to acknowledge them in a way that I think undermines their integrity of being, like, I'm going to go against it. So an obvious example would say somebody thinks that they're dumb. If somebody thinks that they don't have value, that's how they actually see themselves. I'm going to go against it and say, no, you have value, you know, or no, you have intelligence. You may not know what type of intelligence you have, or may not appreciate it, or may not be fully developed, but you got it. I'm not going to go along with their genuine belief that they are unintelligent or a valueless being, right? Plain and simple. So when you come across a situation where a person is saying, I am of this gender, I interpret it in that same light. Of like this, I interpret it as confusion. Right? And so my instinct, my knee-jerk response is to affirm who they are and to speak against the confusion, with the belief that over time, in the same way with a person who may think that they're lacking value or not intelligent, and in time they will come to accept that and be a better person for it, meaning they will increase in holistic integrity. And I see that in that same spirit when it comes to transgender individuals. So I wouldn't, quote unquote, play along, if you will. That wouldn't be my intent. However, I'm aware that there are those who would find that deeply offensive. And they would say, to respect me is just to simply use my preferred pronouns, plain and simple, right? And to say, like, well, then now I feel like I'm playing along with a falsehood concerning yourself. I don't have an answer. I know my principles. I don't know how to apply my principles to that situation. And if I was in that situation, I don't know what I would do. It wouldn't be an issue if I was one-on-one, because you don't really need to use pronouns.
Right.
If you're in a group setting, I would feel like I'm disrespecting my brother or sister if I were to, what I think would be misgendering them by referring to a biological male as a female in the use of my pronouns.
Hey, I have a compromise. Use their name.
That can be really awkward.
No.
If I could manage it, I would. But let's just be honest. In certain conversations, depending upon the flow of the dialogue, that's gonna be crazy awkward, and it's gonna be really obvious. And I've never been in that situation, but if I was, I can honestly say I don't know what I would do. I know what my principles are, but I don't know how to apply them, because part of it goes to it seemed. Well, I'm basing this off of like YouTube videos. Right, because I have experiences that there'll be the response to using what I believe is a proper pronoun is aggression. Don't misgender me, blah, blah. And granted, maybe that's not the normative case in real life, right? But again, PC culture is about painting a narrative that may not be true, but it gets people to act in a certain way. And so there's that anxiety, if you will, that you're going to be attacked, publicly humiliated, effectively attacked if you were to do something in good faith. So that's kind of, I don't have an answer. I know my principles. I don't know how to apply my principles in a way that is tactful. So I don't know if you guys have a thought on that, but to me, that the problem with that is that you combine quote unquote PC culture with identity politics, and even if I'm wrong on the this issue of transgenderism, I think I would like to be persuaded. I don't want to be barked at and dictated that I'm wrong. I would want you to break it down and explain it to me. And it's almost like what we see in what's seen portrayed in the mainstream is that if you do this, then you're going to get attacked. It's like almost like the equivalent of calling like a white person calling a black person the N-word.
Mhm.
That's what misgendering is, like that in magnitude. So it's like you can't even have a conversation because they've mixed up their ideology on gender with their identity in the literal sense. So then now you can't even talk about their worldview, because to critically analyze their worldview is to critically analyze the validity of their existence. And so, of course, if somebody's trying to critically analyze the validity of your existence, you're going to take that deeply personal. You're basically trying to come to an evaluation as to whether or not your existence is valid. So, of course, I can imagine why you'd be upset with that. But if at the same time, regardless of the two perspectives, where's truth in the matter? You know, and it's, you know what I'm saying? It's a very difficult situation when somebody like literally ties their ideology, the way they think, with their identity. I don't know what you guys think about that, or what would you do, or what do you think I should do given what my principles are?
I think we should pause. So then you can edit this out. Does anybody need to take a break? Because I realize we kind of been going at
Yeah,
a little bit.
probably stand up a little bit.
Okay.
This.
Okay.
Yeah, something else going on, I guess.
So just hold that question. I just was like, yeah. Ooh. So, am I coming across more natural this time?
More.
Okay. Well,
It's a
that's
push.
that's better than.
Yeah.
Then.
But you need to chime in more. You need to do what you do when you at home, and you butt in, you interrupt people. You question their salvation. You question their humanity.
I don't do that.
I know that's an
Get that person home.
That's what you need to be doing now.
Well, that's
Because
what people.
otherwise,
No,
it's-
that's
Got your mask on right now?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not for the camera.
Well, I'm not. We had a good conversation. Actually, he taped it, so that's going to be what part of our bonus footage about being authentic, ironically being authentic. And I thought it was just, well, he called me out on it because I was like, oh, maybe we could just do a virtual version of this and stuff. But I didn't even really know that. I knew it bothered me that I'm just being in front of the camera. But he was saying that it was something more than just stage fright, if you will, and stuff like that. But I've always had an issue with, like, being myself, basically, in the public, and then just with people. I mean, even some of my friends haven't seen how I really am, like, with family and stuff like that. And, I don't know, I just haven't allowed myself to be the silly, the goofy, outspoken, funny, just myself, how I am. I'm just not comfortable. I'm just a bit like when I have my mask on, like you said, I'm just restricted. I'm restricted, and But part of it too was like, I guess I was afraid that people would just not accept who I am. And then also I just felt that I wouldn't be as, I guess like as I wouldn't appear to be as intelligent or as poised, as, and sophisticated as I want to appear to be if I just let it, what's the phrase? Let your,
Let it all hang out. Or let your hair down.
Yeah, let your hair down.
Well, that could be interpreted depending on your world.
Yeah. I like that
Interpreted in many different ways.
Let your hair down. Yeah, like if I let my hair down, I won't be, viewed as like the intelligent, articulate, put together young lady that I want to have. But then at the same time, I'm never satisfied with that version of me either, because I can't ever just be myself, and I feel like I'm living a lie.
See?
So it's just as we're talking about identity and identity, and then stuff like that. I don't want to fake the funk.
Yeah.
And I'm learning to. Yeah, sorry, what were you gonna say?
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think that's something that I struggle with for a while, and still do from time to time. But I'm learning to I think gradually I'm learning to step into whoever God has created me to be, whether that's my goofiness, my, whatever it is. Like, I think we all live in such a, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people, I don't know, I feel like there was a time where I was just in a place of like such, like I was chained to what everyone thought about me, and like I wasn't living my life, I was living what everybody else wanted me to be. And so I couldn't really, like I felt like I wasn't able to have fun. So like literally, like this is how it is now. Like I probably have groups of friends where like, I know, like I got groups of friends that like, we're Christians, but we say inappropriate stuff from time to time. You know what I mean? Like we just get each other's personality. But I also got the group of Christian friends that I just know I can't say certain stuff around. Yeah. And it's not, but like, and it's unfortunate that is what it is. But gradually I've been like pushing. Because I'm like who I am, my faith and my identity and who I am is like, it's wrapped up in Christ. So at the end of the day, if I say something that makes you feel a certain way or throws you off or whatever, you know what I mean? Of course, it's not too wild, but it's also like for example, I did like a kickback, I want to say last year, and I invited some people over, and they were Christians, but I've heard these Christians curse, but when I was playing music that had curse words in it, they tried to tell me in front of a group of people like they didn't want to hear it. And I was just like, if you don't get the hell out, like, I don't know, I wish that everyone could just be themselves. We can just live in a world where like, be free. Like as you were talking, I'm like, I feel like we should be able to be ourselves, but also leave room to grow. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like if you ever go to, I don't know, if you go to a coffee shop, they'll ask you for your coffee order, and some people will ask you if you want room at the top, like to add anything. Cream, sugar, whatever.
Starbucks.
And it's like,
okay.
I'm like, I didn't even know that was an option.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, we have to be people who are willing to grow and change. We can't
for the
like,
better.
Yeah,
I would say not going down, but not regression.
Yeah, like there are things that like, like I said, I could have I still don't agree with everything that all of my hardcore socialist or liberal friends say, but I've thankfully, like, God has given me an opportunity to get out and see the world outside of Virginia and Louisiana, so that I can see how other people live and experience other people and talk to people and find out about their lifestyles versus me just judging from what I see on TV or movies or what somebody told me. And it's like, no, I can get out here and I can actually touch gay people and be like, bro, I don't understand that. And it ain't for you to get confused. It's for us to like, I'm gonna laugh about it. And I hope, and if you happen to be offended by it, I would hope that there's a conversation between the two of us before either one of us left. I think we're ashamed of being, I think a lot of us are afraid or ashamed of being ignorant. I think there's growth in ignorance as well. Like we have to.
You're ignorant.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what I would freeze you right there and be like, so what does ignorance mean? And that would be a lesson right there. If you ain't just gonna call me ignorant and think you insult me.
Well, and the thing is that everybody is ignorant.
Exactly.
Because nobody has all information. So that literally is what ignorant means, is that you're not informed.
Yeah.
So obviously everybody is ignorant, but they're making it sound like you have no knowledge of nothing. But I will say that was a big, remember we talked about that was a barrier for me. I didn't want to appear to be uneducated. In the standpoint of, I know certain things, of course, everybody does. I know certain things. I'm just not, how do I put it, like, I would say I'm not savvy in certain areas, like politics. I'm not savvy in that. I know some things are going on, but I don't know. I couldn't hold a conversation basically about that because I don't know enough about it, and I just haven't
Does it pique your
trained.
interest?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm not really interested, but in some ways it is, but I just don't.
It's not a priority.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. It hasn't been a priority, and it's not a priority for me. I'm just like, and then I was starting to think about it, like, what exactly is that? And from the last conversation we had at the first taping, I was trying to think, like, is there a word to describe what I was feeling? And it was like, I feel like I know. There's stuff that I know very well, you know, like. But then there's things that I don't know well. And I was like, well, what is that? You know, and then I think, like, the last time, I think Renitra said it, she said that she really focused, in her worldview in the past, I think she said something like, she really focused on how other people treated her and how people treated one another. And that was a focus of hers when she was younger, and I could relate to that because that's what I realized. I was like, oh, I was like hyper focused on external of how other people were treating me and what other people were doing and like how they were wrong, and then how they were treating each other. So I was hyper focused on that. So I'm very knowledgeable in that, or very aware, you know, had that type of consciousness of that. But then when it came to myself, like internally, I didn't examine like myself or like question, well, why do I feel this way? Or what do I think about this and believe about that? Like that was just non-existent. And I was trying to think of words for that. And then I don't know how I stumbled on it. It was just a couple days ago. It was introspection. That's the internal thing. And then extrospection is outside of oneself or whatever. And I was like, yeah, so I was very extrospection oriented, but not introspectively oriented. Which seems weird because I always thought that people would be like, oh, you have such insight about yourself and stuff, and I'll be like, I do, but not in the sense of examination. You know what I mean? Like not in the sense of like take a personal inventory of yourself, like not in that sense. It was just I knew I could articulate my experience very well, what I was experiencing, what was going on with me internally, spiritually. I could say what that looked like, but I didn't do the exercise, I wasn't even conscientious of like, oh, maybe I should see like what I like, or like something as basic as that, or like what kind of things do I like? Why do I like them? You know. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to describe, like, and I was like, there has to be a word or a term, or there has to be something to describe what's going on here, because I would feel so just unconscious about it, just like just no mind for that at all, you know. But I'll be hyper focused on other people, like externally. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And it was just like. So I felt like that really described, like, when you're talking about the not wanting to appear ignorant, I didn't want to, you know, because a lot of my focus had been on how people are and how they're acting and how they're, you know, treating. Yeah, just basically, their outward self and how they're doing stuff, interacting with others and then with me. And I'll be like, oh, you know, well, that's, you know, they're not, you know, that's where the moral superiority came in, because I'll be like, oh, see, they, you know, I would just make up in my mind.
Yeah.
Not now, but like, especially like teen, you know, childhood, teen, early adult, I would just be like, oh, well, they think, you know, I would put them on a pedestal that they were like perfect. You know what I mean? Or like almost perfect, and then like
the way they carry themselves.
Because of the way they carry themselves. But the thing was, I had a distorted view of truth and God and life and stuff like that. So I was thinking, within my view, that like they're darn near perfect and stuff like that. So when they did do something that failed me, it was like devastating.
Yeah.
It was devastating, and I would also judge them. I would be like, oh, see, because there'll be people that would be like, you know, I would put up here, and then I'll be like, oh, you know, they kind of stayed up here. Then if they did something, like even if it was like a teeny tiny, like it would be something minor, and I would just be like, oh yeah, see, you know, I'm better than that because I didn't do that. Like it's really
Yeah.
it's messed up.
But
But
we live in-
that's
that's-
how I was thinking.
But that's part of the. But I think that's part of the problem is we live in such a like superficial, artificial. Like we live in such a fake world where like people can't.
Let's go back.
Like,
I feel like
I
we're
really
talking
want to
about
be like I
Just
like
like keep talking and just have a seat.
it's
Yeah.
stressful.
Like, the
Chairs ain't comfortable,
No.
so.
I'm sorry.
And I'm 300 pounds. It ain't got no back either.
you want to switch to wine?
No, you good. I can do this for another 5 minutes.
Do you want?
No, I'm just. We
Oh,
still
are you
rolling or
serious?
we
Yeah.
we paused?
Okay, we're wrong.
Oh.
So, just of how things are, just how it's hard to be authentic, or just that haven't been trained and just can be stuck, like and stuck in your own thoughts and world. And I thought that there was something that would describe what I was feeling or experiencing, and it looked like I was able to judge. I was judging or very focused, hyper focused on external, so extroversion, and how other people were interacting with others, and how they were interacting with me, instead of I didn't even have a mind for how I was interacting with my own self and really with other people. The introversion or introspection part of it. But you were saying that how it was the kind of the fakeness. We live in such a fake type.
It's artificial,
Artificial.
superficial.
Mhm.
Like we just live in a world where like, I part of me, I think, in addition to a lot of the food we eat, a lot of our sickness comes from us trying to navigate spaces. You know, like.
Code
not
switching.
feeling like
Code
yeah,
switching.
or code switch. But even that happens at work. But we also do that in a lot of our everyday spaces. You know, even with some of our friends. And so, I think we've robbed a lot of people. A lot of us have robbed a lot of people of allowing them to see who we really are, and then allowing them to make a decision as to whether or not, we align, or we're compatible, or I personally believe that you can have friend group, you can have a social circle where you don't always agree, politically, you don't have to agree. And I also believe that I think there's potential for a lot of growth in those spaces versus the echo chamber or someone always, like, you're right, yeah, Donald Trump's right on everything. Insert a couple liberals into that conversation and see how mad you get. You know what I mean? Or vice versa. Mm-hmm. But that is, that encourages growth. That encourages, if it could change my worldview from me hearing something from you, and it would make, life better, I would, I could treat people better. Like, I'm for it. Like, let me hear it. But if you, I think again, you have to be intentional about creating that space. But
that's the difficulty. Like, I think you're touching on something so powerful, and it deeply resonates with me. Is that, and also this is why I say this a lot. That's why Trump got elected. He's authentic, and authentic doesn't mean honest. it means authentic. It means what you see is what you get. In other words, be honest with yourself. Don't you think that the way Trump is in public is probably the exact same way he is in private? In terms of demeanor, in terms of what he says and what he thinks?
For the most part.
I
For-
think,
for the
I think
most
he's
part.
I think he's a lot
100%,
worse
but-
in private. Yeah,
Oh, you think he would be worse?
I think he's a lot worse. Well,
If you had to guess? I mean, we don't know.
I just yeah.
Okay.
I
So if I had to guess, I would think it'd be roughly the same.
yeah.
But I don't know because I don't see him in private.
Yeah, yeah.
But I could believe it. I could believe that he's roughly the same in private as he is in person. You know, like the things that he does and the fact that he uses a personal Twitter, which, he.
How is that even allowed?
It's
for
not
pre-
it's
for
not,
pres-
it's not appropriate,
I
but
think it would be confiscated when he leaves because I guess it's a tool of the United States or government.
it'll be
He's
interpreted.
using
It'll be
it. So
interpreted
when he
as such.
says something now, he made a. I want to say last year, he basically made this his official. Like if he says he's fired people via Twitter. So like he's using that. Like, bro, you have to. I can't remember how the exact how it's worded, exactly how it's worded, but those like government handles or that if you're using that as like a government or official means to govern, I think it's like you have to give it up. Once
I know
you're
that.
done. So, yeah.
Okay. But I think what he's doing is that he's showing that there's a difference between being respectful and authentic. There's a difference between being honest and authentic. He's not claiming to be respectful or having the temperament, of a president, or even being honest. In my strong opinion, he's saying he's almost like showing pure authenticity without it being combined with other good attributes like honesty, like transparency, like respectfulness. Like it's almost like he's intentionally not combining this one good feature with others lest you be confused. In that saying that this is not the only way authenticity can look like, but it is authentic, and people are so starved, in my opinion, for permission to be authentic, almost by any means necessary.
I think that's part of it. I think that's definitely part of how he got elected.
Okay, certainly not all. I personally think it's the primary, but I mean, I guess that'll be a matter of opinion, I guess. But
and we can go with assistants he had. We can go with Hillary. We can go with there are a lot of something completely different.
Let's even talk about him getting the Republican ticket. So you make a good point. His opposition at the time.
Yeah. So
if he went against Bernie, probably. Who knows?
It might not have been the same.
It might not have been the same.
So.
But him getting the Republican ticket, though, when it was against the Republican establishment that didn't want him, though the folks, you could say, a large portion obviously did want him. What was his one redeeming quality?
But this is what I tell, and so when I try to give Northerners a bit of perspective from the like Southern perspective, it's like. That's what it's like. A lot of the things that he was saying, which is it speaks to his authenticity. But like he just, he was a mouthpiece for people who felt like they didn't have a voice, and it was politician after politician making the same old promises and not delivering. And for a lot of people, this was someone completely different, someone who wasn't a politician, wasn't a career politician, and. He wasn't. You're right. He wasn't. He wasn't so PC. He wasn't like.
By any stretch of imagination.
And so they got a chance to see that on stage, and so it was so different. It was so far. It was so extreme that I think people had just gotten tired of seeing the same old tricks, and so. They didn't want to go left because it was,
8 years of. Yeah, 8 years of left-leaning politics.
Yeah, and so a lot of people just wanted to see what the new person was about. And so what we have now is we have. I think when I said earlier, I believe that. When I say I believe that he's worse behind the scenes, it's like I believe that who we see is what we get, but that is his filter. He would love to say
Oh.
so much more on Twitter,
Interesting.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
but he realizes that they're already tweaking about the stuff that I'm saying now. Imagine if I was really to let my hair down type thing. You know what I mean?
That's interesting.
Or let my, hair piece or whatever. Whatever he, you know what I mean? Like he just.
take my toupee off.
But I just think that who we have is. This is what he deems. Like I think that there are boundaries, and he's like, I feel like he's molded, or his team is molded. It's kind of simmered him down a little bit, you know what I mean? So I believe that what we have right here is like, yeah, he says some crazy stuff, but I believe behind the scenes there's a worse character, because I believe, I guess, if you believe that people only show you what they want you to see, then how could that possibly be how could he be in that role? You know what I mean?
Well, I think that was what got him.
But
he said the news media is what got him elected. There's a lot of truth to that. He didn't do a lot of advertising. He didn't need to. He got the airtime through the news media.
Oh,
who hated
absolutely.
him. So I feel like his personality was well aligned with the climate of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I don't follow him. The only thing I really knew him from was The Apprentice.
Oh, yeah.
When I was kind of watching it.
But even
And
then,
that
so
he was
like
really
I knew
rich.
him then, so like, or not like I got his number. I knew, so I actually have him. So he's always been kind of admired in like hip hop community because of business moves, not because of anything that he's ever said. He had a joint book he did with Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, I believe it's called. But so we've known of him. We just didn't know of the character. We didn't know about the character of the person. We didn't know about his soul and who he was. And so so who we saw on what was the reality show you just said?
Apprentice.
The Apprentice. We didn't see that same character who's now in office, and so somewhere in his mind he believes that I don't think he can.
That's
contain,
interesting. You're saying it's yet another character,
but
so to speak, in the same way that the way he presents himself on The Apprentice may or may not be the way he presents himself when he's doing real estate.
Yeah.
That nobody's really having cameras on.
Yeah, but I also think he's being pulled too, because he knows like certain things will trigger the left, and then he knows that the things that trigger the left also rile up his base. But he knows that there's a balance because he has to play it safe.
That's funny.
Because
But
he
yeah,
has to
it is.
win. He has to win votes across the aisle, which is what helped him. Because there were a lot of people who voted for Barack Obama twice, but just didn't think that Hillary was the right candidate, and so they jumped ship.
Yeah.
And so he knows that he has to win.
And that's
He
interesting
has to
because
cross the aisle.
Obama, it really was, in many ways, non-mainstream. He had a relatively short career as a senator, which is no small feat. But he wasn't a career politician really himself.
No, he gave a speech at the DNC, and that was in like 04.
Yeah, that's what popped it off.
And that's what set him on fire. And it was like, who is this guy?
Yeah. So in a way, Barack Obama was desired to be a fresh take.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the spirit of when people wanting that, some people saw that in Trump. It's like it's a fresh take from a very different angle, but still a fresh take.
Yeah.
Hillary, wouldn't be that because she has a well-established career, which is fine. But if that's not what the folks are trusting, then you're gonna run into issues. But I think that that's an interesting point. Is that he definitely people who support him, especially like Trump supporters, not Republicans who vote the ticket no matter what, but real Trump supporters, it seems like they really feel he gives them the voice. And I think that's true on a policy level, but also even on the social level of saying, I want it to be okay to express my conservative views.
Yeah.
But I just want to express them. Like, even if people don't agree with them, I just want it to be okay to talk about it at the water cooler, And so it's like this guy, in his own way, is molding society to a degree where that's being made okay.
But if So what is it? I guess this is the line is though for any side is like when hate is involved in your belief. Like a large part of the reason he got elected was because of the birther issue. The man said that he started off with Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States. He kept pushing the birth certificate
prior to his political campaigns.
Like he's running for president since the '80s though.
Oh,
he's been running for hey, I'm gonna throw my. I don't know if that was for marketing.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
But,
he never got far.
Yeah, he never got far.
But you're right.
So.
It's probably the birther thing.
The birther issue, and so for him, for a lot of people who, I mean, then you had like, his rhetoric on when it came to Muslims or Palestinians or people in South America, particularly Mexico or Venezuela, hardline conservatives. This is some of the same rhetoric that George W. Bush, used. Him keeping a tough line with like Iran or like, and so like a lot of these things.
But you're saying these are in the spirit of, or can be considered hate. But I want to challenge that a little bit. You probably know a little bit more than I do, but I'm unaware of. What can you give some examples? I feel like I try to give people the benefit of the doubt as much as possible, and I feel like it doesn't seem like he's utilized hate language in his war on PC culture, if you will. Mm-hmm. I don't think that. Now, it could be because maybe I'm unaware. So where have you seen him using, like, because I think that's important to distinguish, is that we're talking about being able to communicate with people, especially if you don't share your worldview, your ideology. Mm-hmm. Okay, but there is such a thing as hateful speech. Yeah, we'll call it hate speech for brevity. And then there's controversial speech. So where have you seen him leveraging like hate speech?
I mean, to try to make a full-on ban of all Muslims entering the United States.
Okay.
A law.
Okay. Now So here's the benefit of the doubt. Benefit of the doubt perspective. Mm-hmm. He said explicitly why. He said, "I don't believe we know what the heck is going on in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. We cannot discern from the good and the bad. Therefore, it is his policy to put a ban on all Muslims." So he was explicit, at least to the public, as to what his intent was behind it. It was ignorance. In the truest sense of the word. It's hateful. But is it hateful when you are operating out of ignorance and you have a genuine concern for the safety of your nation?
But here's what I'm saying, and that's why his base loves him.
Is what?
That's why his base loves him. That's why his base loves him. He will say, he won't go straight out there and say, "I hate Muslims," or "I hate." He's catering to his base. This man wants to win, so he says things, or he'll say, for example, I'm paraphrasing, why do we have to have all these people coming in from all these shithole countries? Can't we have somebody from Sweden or Norway?
What was he referring?
Can we get more people from Sweden or Norway? He didn't even say. He could have said it, but it's a. But
okay, so I like to look at those two because I think those are good examples. Yeah. When it comes to the Muslim one, he may very well be in line with his base, who may also be ignorant as to how to identify peaceful Muslims versus violent Muslims. And so if they are ignorant and he is ignorant, then is it not the case that in the state of ignorance that would be the policy? Given a state of ignorance, of admitted ignorance, that would be the policy.
The man isn't dumb. As much as I like to call the man dumb, he's not dumb.
He acts.
I'm not. No. I agree with you, but he's saying that on this issue, he is not confident. He knows that he can't discern them. he's not confident that our intelligence agency, CIA, has the intelligence to discern between good and violent and peaceful Muslims.
And that is the way.
And so I'm saying, if that's the case, if you genuinely believe the CIA is effectively incompetent in this specific regard, it would make sense that you would want that
But why not?
It would make sense that would be your policy.
But why wouldn't you communicate it as such? It's one thing to be ignorant. It's another thing to state where your ignorance lies. So like the way that he stated about the banning all Muslims. I mean, why wouldn't you just say, I'm not sure where they're, if they're the good ones from the bad ones, therefore I'm going to ban them all. I would think you would give people more peace of mind and know where you're coming from if you say what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
That's
but,
I mean,
but he did.
He explicitly said that.
Okay, I listened. He said this during during the Republican debates.
Okay.
I was following it at the time, and in the Republican debate, he said exactly what I said. The reason why in the policy he adopts, in my opinion, if you watched the debate, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you take just the clip, I think we should have a ban on all Muslims, effectively taking out of context. Of course, that would leave the impression. Now, did the mainstream media do that? Take out of context? I'll be honest with you. I don't watch the mainstream media that closely. I don't know if they did or didn't, so I won't make the accusation. What I can say is that I watched the debate, and the reason why I shared with you what I shared with you is because I watched it.
Yeah, I watched it too. But
okay.
The issue is him doubling down on stuff like that. It's not like, he just said it and it was the media. It's always like amplify something. It's like, no, they'll ask him and he'll double down or triple down on what he said. And it's like,
you mean in light of new information? In
light of new information, or they'll say, President Trump, did you mean or critics are, and he'll be like, yes, I'm like. For example, the 5% increase that they're going to impose on Mexico on
the tariffs.
The tariffs. We're going to pay for that. We're going to pay for that, and regardless of the information they've shown him, like, hey, this is going to affect the economy, and he's talking about a 5% increase all the way up to 25%.
Okay, but you're talking about bad. And what, in my opinion, is bad policy versus hateful. Utilizing hateful speech.
I'm giving an example of how he doubles down. And so
when
you say something to him about the hateful speech, or you bring it to his attention, you're like, what? Like, that's not hateful, but he'll double down on that. So
I'm not disputing that he doubles down on a regular basis. What I'm saying is that I think you brought up a good example or potential example of something. In my opinion, in the context of it, you can accuse him of ignorance. He's admitting ignorance. And his policy is therefore based upon his admitted ignorance. So you can say it's bad policy, which I personally would agree with, but how can you say that it's part of hate speech?
Because it's about... Oh, go ahead. No, you didn't get it.
No, I was just going to say, I know this sounds obvious, but hate meaning what? I mean, hate...
An intent to harm a particular group of people. At the least.
He uses microaggressions, like
to harm someone or a group of people.
When you talk about hate speech, it's almost always in reference to a group of people. Mm-hmm. So you're using language with the intent of doing harm to a specific demographic of people.
Yeah.
Is it the intent, or is it that it did just it was harmful?
Well, normally people's are concerned about the intent. If it's inadvertent, then we just say that was a bad policy due to ignorance. We don't say that was a hate crime or hate speech. We just say you didn't know what you were talking about, and so you made a bad call. But if the intent is to do harm, then now we have concern. Now you're intending to do harm to a particular group of people. And in that specific example, I think it's a good one because it's like, this guy's admitting ignorance. And he's basing a policy off of his own admitted ignorance. You can accuse him of bad policy or even being an incompetent politician, but that's not the same as saying it's hate speech.
I think it's hate speech coming from a bigot. I think that bigots know how to use correct, especially in such a PC, in this PC culture. I think that he uses words to rile up his base, like. ever since 9/11, there's been like this. We're talking about phobias, Islamophobia.
Okay.
There's been so he's using these things. He's looking for this. To me, it's about the browning of America. You know. So even so it's his attacks are usually on it seems black or brown or people outside of his. I mean, he will say stuff here and there when it's critics who are in journalism or in the media, but to ban or to say I'm going to close off this border, and it is perfectly legal for anyone coming across the Mexican border or I believe Canadian border anywhere. I believe that it is perfectly legal to seek asylum. The man is saying,
Yes.
no, we don't want you here.
But time out. Like I think okay.
He is telling
Trump
like, it
is
is
an
law.
extreme example, but he may be a good example. So you
Of
have
what?
you have a general
What?
impression of the difference between being respectful and being PC. Because I think he does in many.
If Trump could say, "I don't want them damn Mexicans here," he would.
So what
He said, he strikes me as that person that would say that behind closed
But you
doors.
have this impression, right? So we're talking about your worldview ideology. Like you've come to this impression of him, and I'm trying to understand. You have probably multiple lines of evidence that brings you to that conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
When we looked at the Muslim one, especially if you're coming from a perspective of trying to give the benefit of the doubt, in my opinion, that doesn't seem to hold water. But you do have multiple lines of evidence that brings you to that conclusion. So when you look at the border issue, I guess it is a border issue. We have 11 million illegal individuals from the South, not from the North, not from Canada. So he's saying, well, where do we have a security breach? Is it from the North? Well, no, it's from the South. So he's saying, well, then let's lock the door on the South so that, as you should, that's your job as commander in chief. And so so the reason why the intention is on the South is because that's where we've had the security breach to the degree that 11 million undocumented people are here. So I mean
that's over a period of time, and that number has dropped. He has gaslit this. He's made this.
What do you mean?
issue.
You're saying that they've
there was
returned?
never an emergency. No, there's been an influx now because there are people who are coming from.
I'm not saying it's 11 million over the course of like a year or even 5 years.
Okay,
We're talking about over the course of 20 years under both red and
That's
blue
the
presidents.
estimated number. So it's supposed to be.
So
like
under
11
red
million.
and blue presidents, we've over time gotten a total of 11 million. What he's saying is that means for 20 years we had an unsecured border. I would say that's factually correct unless there's some sort of effective conspiracy going on, which the government's just watching people cross the border. But so I don't see, if I'm giving somebody the benefit of the doubt, I'm not seeing where the anti-Brown mindset or interpretation is coming from, because the facts are is that for 20 years 11 million came in through the South, not through the North. So he's saying, as commander-in-chief, it's my responsibility to lock the door on the South because there's a security breach there that doesn't exist on the Atlantic, on the Pacific, nor from the North. To me, like,
it's not a. But the fact
you get
is,
what I'm saying?
The fact is that people who enter America illegally enter from all over by boat, from Haiti, from Cuba, from all over the world.
Agreed.
And so it's. But what
But
it
it's
is, it's a
disproportionate
target.
from
No, it's a
Mexico.
target. So we have a border. The issue is what's happening
It's not
now.
secure.
It is secure. It is secure.
All
What's happening is there are holes, but he's tried to make this like it's an emergency. How come he hasn't said anything about it in 2 months? If it's that much of an emergency, this is a political.
Well, time out. His whole campaign was based upon border security. I mean, in all fairness, he campaigned on border security as one of his primary things. In all fairness,
He campaigned
You
on
follow politics a little
Every-
closer than I
every
do,
president-
but from before he became president to when he became
every president since
he's been-
9/11 has campaigned on border security. They've campaigned on border
Not-
security in the
not like-
past, but
hold
it's
on.
amplified since
not
9/11.
like not like, but Trump, in my opinion, I follow the past.
He
few
understands.
elections.
He knew the base that was going to get him to win, and it was a red base. You're talking about a man who was a Democrat 6 years
But
ago,
are you
and
giving-
now
But I'm just saying, are you? I understand what you're saying, but like, are you giving him a fair hearing
I have.
when it's like, wouldn't you say it's a fact that border security from on the Mexican border
To
is
say
an
it's
issue?
No, it's not an issue.
So when we have 11 million undocumented
But
workers,
you word it as if they came in during his term or during the last 5 or 6 years.
I'm not suggesting. I'm saying
You have people
again,
seeking asylum, and they can legally seek
But Frank,
asylum
I'm talking,
here.
again, like I said, I'm talking about for over the span of
Mhm.
at least 20 years, we've had a total of 11 million undocumented workers. That means I interpret that as 20
Mhm.
years of neglect. As far as I'm aware, Trump very much so interprets that as 20 years of neglect, and he intends to stop 20 years of neglect. That, I mean, what has he said that makes you think otherwise? That he hasn't, because he's been harsh on Bush, he's been harsh on Obama. So that's part of the 20 years. That's basically the 20 years. And so, to me, it's like there's nothing out of place with somebody criticizing the previous 2 presidents
Mhm.
who participated in permitting over time 11 million undocumented workers. That is a security breach, and he's saying it stops now. Like, to me, there's nothing there's nothing fishy about that.
But here's my issue is to I want to say there are gaps in our border. I think border security can always be improved. I'm not justifying. Here's what I am for. I'm here for people who are legally seeking asylum. I don't encourage or believe that anyone should be breaking any laws in terms of entering anyone's country illegally. I'm not justifying that at all. But the dehumanization of Black or brown people or Mexican Americans, or to make it seem like they have nothing to contribute or to. The man was talking about packing up 11 million?
Yeah, 11 million.
The man's talking about packing up 11 million people and shipping them somewhere.
Has that ever been a part of his official policy?
Yes, the man said yes. He talked about he was talking what is the word? Exporting everyone that is here illegal. And it's like these
okay,
or everyone,
but even
so here,
but that's
or
not,
illegal.
But is that? I don't think that's not inherently prejudiced or hateful.
Here's what I'm saying. I just gave
you can say it's factually impractical.
Bro, we could talk
I
about
would-
his,
you know what I'm saying?
his military ban. We could talk about his comments.
Okay,
I'm
I
talking
will
about
agree with you
issues
on
that
that.
he's doubled down on. I'm not talking about someone gave us a sound bite. I'm telling you, I've been watching this man over his. I have magazines where I've referred to this. I have a high school magazine when I was wrestling, and I said in this magazine I would like to be like a Black Donald Trump. You think I had any idea? My position on him
Where
has
has he
changed
not? Where have you seen
overnight.
him not double down? Maybe that will help me to understand the perspective better. Where is he not doubled down? And
Where's he not doubled down? I would say when has he not doubled down? I feel like I think.
Is
I
that
feel
just
like.
emphasized?
I feel like a
or is
lot
it
of times he
emphasizing?
talks. It's a pride thing. So like
I agree.
it's a pride thing.
But
And
pride
so
is
even
not-
when he
pride
knows
is
that
not
he's
prejudice.
wrong, he'll say.
Pride is not prejudice, and that's why I'm trying to understand
not-
where do you see prejudice? It has to be something
in
beyond his pride.
in his rhetoric, in the history of employee or him owning real estate in New York and him evicting Black tenants without notice and him denying rooms to Black and brown tenants in New York. There has been litigation throughout the wazoo of like this man was a slumlord. Like New York didn't vote for this man, and he's a product of New York. Like it's been known that this was how he operated. It was just on the low.
So are you saying he got convicted of what, discriminatory practices?
Yeah, he was sued. He
No,
had to pay a hefty
I
fine.
said, did he get convicted?
He's, as far as I know, I think he.
And he's settled in court.
I think one of the cases he settled, and I think he's still in litigation
Okay, so
for like
but you
3 or
get-
4.
Settling is not guilt. Sometimes people
Hey, you're right.
settle
You're right.
because of
Settling
money.
settling
Right.
isn't an admission of guilt. It isn't. Sorry. Go
I
ahead.
feel no. I just what I'll say as far as Trump seeming hateful, I would just to me it seems like the way he speaks about people, which I feel like can be harmful. So if you're saying now, if he had the intention to do that and the intention for him to keep his voters and his base, his supporters, perhaps, I don't know, I can't say with certainty. But I'm just saying, to me, it's the way in which he speaks about how he spoke about Mexicans. Because the way that I was interpreting it, and you have to understand, how is the average Joe Blow person going to interpret what the media or what they're hearing and reading, newspaper, blogs, TV, whatever form of media you're getting the debates, discussion, White House press. And so when I'm hearing things about, how he was speaking about immigration, to me it just sounded inflammatory in that he was like lumping a group of people together and just as though they're all bad. And to me, because there wasn't like an emphasis on a clear distinction and emphasis on no, I'm not like if he were to be like I don't mean all of them, or not even saying all of them, that even sounds racist to say them. But I'm not saying that Mexicans are all bad or blacks are all bad. It seemed like the emphasis was more on just get them out of here.
That's
Like as opposed to lumping a group together. It's the way it's spoken. I'm just saying.
But is it inconsistent with that? What you said, pride versus prejudice. I mean, you didn't say that, but you were talking about his pride, and I'm saying, show me his prejudice. So what I'm saying is that if he's behaving in a prideful way that results in a general disrespect, or to be blunt, to be irrational. Like the way he doubles down on the wall specifically, I would say is just blatantly irrational pride. So there's a difference between a person who's pride and also generally disrespectful. I think in certain ways, I would say there's strong evidence that he is generally disrespectful in certain aspects.
I think it goes beyond.
So when you say beyond, so you have to show me an example where he's behaving in a way that's.
Yeah. Sorry. Hit some of this stuff too.
Him allowing racist or former Klansmen or Klan members to endorse him. David Duke is a well-known Klansman. This man has been to his fundraisers. He's a well-known Klansman. Was the Grand Wizard of the Klan. This man didn't say anything. He didn't denounce David Duke until everyone came out. The man was going to willingly take the money and the support if it meant him winning. And him. So it's like, again, him knowing right from wrong, and it's like, bro, you really believe some of this stuff. You really,
maybe he's trying to win. You get what I'm saying? Like his platform is.
So are you saying play the part of a bigot so that he can
that?
win?
No, you're not.
That's what I'm saying. His base is people who don't have a voice in this society.
He can still give them a voice without being a bigot. He doesn't have to.
Those are by definition the outcasts. He gives a voice to the outcasts of society. And remember, there's two types of outcasts. There's the quote-unquote mainstream outcasts and the non-mainstream outcasts. The outcasts that are accepted by society, that would be the LGBT community. The outcasts that are not accepted by society, alt-right, KKK, which is a small group now, but alt-right would be a much larger group. People who live in the rural communities, people don't care about what's going on with them in regards to the opioid crisis or just in general. Their economic situation. When people talk about poverty, they think about urban poverty. They don't think about rural poverty, And so what I'm saying is that when you talk about the outcasts that are not acknowledged by the mainstream, that was kind of his target demographic. from an economic standpoint and from a social standpoint. From a social standpoint, that really gets into what we first talked about before, is that if you have an ideology that's an outcast ideology, but that's not accepted by the mainstream as a legitimate minority view, because there are minority views that are accepted by the mainstream, but there are also minority views that are not accepted, meaning you can't even talk about those things. He targeted people who are outcasts that are not accepted by the mainstream, and he didn't show any prejudice on those outcasts rejected by the mainstream. He didn't show any prejudice. It seems that he was consistent on his catering towards mainstream rejected outcasts.
Yeah, neo-Nazis,
Okay,
Charlottesville,
right.
all that. Like,
But
he
so
let-
that's what I'm saying. It doesn't mean he agrees
Yes,
with
it
their
does. The man
ideology.
said-
He's saying, I want to allow you to participate.
What I'm saying is that what you're saying,
Uh-huh.
I believe, is a different character behind the scenes. He's okay with that information. He's showing us what, I mean, if it's about winning, there's
Yeah.
certain things that, you know, like when he said when Heather Heyer was killed in Charlottesville, Virginia, she was run over. The man literally said there were good people on both. No, you had neo-Nazis who are hateful of anyone who wasn't white or pure skin, versus a crowd of protesters who were peacefully protesting. I think, and so like when you say like what is nice about, or you can say, oh well, maybe some people. He tried to use an example, and again he didn't denounce until like 4 days later after everyone got a hold to him, and he's just like, whoa, I need to denounce this thing. But it's like, why? I mean, let's say he was like playing a part, why
Right.
not just say, no, like I strongly denounce the neo-Nazis. No, there wasn't or maybe he
Do you
tried to
think
say
he-
people
do you
got
think he-
mixed
He
in.
wouldn't
I
want.
think
He was
he
like people got mixed. No, because if people, he was like there were also people here who were protesting the taking down of the Confederate statues.
Okay.
So they joined the neo-Nazis and were marching with tiki torches in Target outfits.
But
Like-
again, that's the point. He's for the minority voice. So what I'm saying
The
is,
man is a bigot.
So-
Well, why can't he be?
okay,
Why
okay, so
can't
I'm
he be
not-
both? Why can't he did that as a
Well,
strategy,
okay, here's my
and he's
point.
a bigot?
because
here's
it's
my
part
point.
of what he believes.
No, I'm saying.
no. She's
I'm
saying
saying
why,
yes.
why can't I guess either of us accept the possibility that he's both? I'm saying is
Right,
that I
right.
will accept
Right.
that he's a bigot if you give me clear evidence.
No,
the only clear
I mean him.
I mean,
Maybe he did. I'm saying if there aren't perhaps clear examples in what he's done as president, let's just say that. If there weren't any, that still doesn't mean that he's not a bigot.
So the
Do you see what I'm
respectful
saying?
thing to do is assume somebody is good until they've proven themselves to be evil. I don't think it's I mean, otherwise that's a definition of a prejudice. I'm going to assume you haven't done any harm unless I have reason to believe that you have done harm in a
Tell that to
particular
the
way.
black tenants in New York
know?
who he like wrongfully evicted.
I can't
or
speak.
did not allow
I can't.
them residency in any of his not any of his buildings.
I can't speak
But-
to that. You said there was one is in litigation, one was in settlement, so I cannot make a judgment on that. So what I'm
So
saying,
I've seen enough until he shows me otherwise. He ain't been I haven't seen anything otherwise. All I've seen
but
is
you can't
a
say
history
guilty.
of-
So do you believe in guilty until proven innocent, or innocent?
I believe in
until proven
I believe in what do you call it? Is it due process? Is that what they call it?
So innocent
That's
until proven
yeah,
guilty.
that's innocent.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Meaning, I feel like
Okay, so
I just
you-
laid out a laundry list of why I believe he's a bigot.
Oh, okay. So then,
Everything from
So
before
when
he
you-
was president.
so then, I'm saying clearly I've articulated a different way of interpreting it. So, I guess my intention isn't to change your mind, but just to expose that there are different ways of interpreting it.
Absolutely.
And so when we're
Absolutely.
talking about different worldviews and different ideologies, it's like I feel like that's what we don't do. We don't acknowledge the different ways. I'm not accusing you of this. I'm just
Yeah.
saying in general, this is our Achilles heel as a society. We don't acknowledge the different ways of looking at it. We don't even try.
But we were just talking about that on the couch. Like, I mean, I feel like we have to.
Right, so we have to. So, okay, so then.
But if they don't, if there's some options, somebody proposed this, somebody proposed that. But if you still see that as what you're interpreting as accurate,
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it too is almost okay. I feel in this instance there's a provability aspect of it. You can't say
Okay.
with certainty, and I feel like the thing is that at that point you're just doing speculation that it's possible he may not be racist, and it's also possible he may be racist. I mean, at that point, well then what? At the end of the day, did you get resolution?
Hold on.
Like,
But-
at the
but-
end of the
that's
day,
why I
I'm
emphasized.
saying,
I
like,
said innocent till proven guilty. So Frank, in all fairness, laid out multiple lines of evidence.
Yeah.
In each line of evidence, I said innocent till proven guilty. Okay. What seems to me, because basically now we're analyzing the conversation we just had, but I think that's the point, is that, and maybe there's other lines of evidence that Frank, it can think of. It almost seems like Frank is seeing on each of those lines of evidence that it's almost like a guilty until proven innocent. So that's my interpretation. My interpretation could be wrong, right? My perception could be wrong. But
Does
like,
he have to,
I'm just saying,
lynch somebody in order for me to, like, what is he? For me, it's like, this is my, and again, this is my lens from the stuff that I've read, the things that I've seen.
right.
But for me, I got,
But my point is
Go
that
ahead,
you
go ahead,
mentioned,
sorry, I shouldn't cut you
to
off.
your credit, Frank, you mentioned multiple lines of evidence. So it's basically like, how do we approach, as a general principle, each line of evidence? And now, obviously, you may say I'm biased because I believe what I believe, but in each line of evidence, I was saying I'm not going to assume he's guilty of this until I have definitive evidence in this specific line of
What does that
evidence.
look like for you, though?
Okay, I would say the transgender ban in the military is the only piece of evidence that he holds personal prejudice. His logic for why transgenders shouldn't be in the military, in my opinion, makes absolutely no sense.
I know.
It's 100% illogical.
But how is that hateful? Because you said it's
Because
prejudice.
it's because,
I
because
don't
it's
know
so
why- how's that
glaringly illogical. He must have. He has. Okay, there's two possibilities. He's either trying to rile his base and saying, "I think my base doesn't like transgender people. I see an opportunity to oppress them, and I'm going to take it." The only other interpretation I can think of is he personally has issue with transgender people, and he has an opportunity to oppress them, so he does. It has to be one of those two, in my opinion. I don't know him as personally. I don't know. It would seem like he probably doesn't care about the LGBT community at all. If I had to guess, because he's historically been like liberal in his thinking, in terms of majority kind of voting Democrat or supporting more left-leaning ideas. But to me, if you have a moral conscience, if you're taking an action just to play the part, you're still, you're playing a part. And if you're taking action that's oppressive towards a group of people, and even if doing it to play the part, that still is a reflection on you. Because why would you play a hand in the oppression, even just for appearances? There has to be something corrupt
And so then,
in you. That is the only line of evidence that I personally believe is evidence of a personal prejudice.
so when he says, while we have all, and again I'm paraphrasing, but I'm pretty sure I'm close. Why do we have all these people coming here from these shithole countries? Why can't we get more people from Norway or Sweden? He wouldn't. So a European country of all the other countries, but all the shithole countries, he named.
Well, hold on. He didn't say Greece. Notice he didn't say France. Those Nordic countries are they don't really reflect the general state of Europe.
So why he could have.
So if he were to name France and Greece, I would say this is a Euro bias.
So-
because he mentioned only these Nordic countries, which are not reflective in their economic status to the rest of Europe in general, that to me means that he's giving special attention to these nations in particular.
So he couldn't have.
He could have said what? What's
Dubai.
He
Dubai?
couldn't have said
Something.
He could have.
a brown country. He couldn't have. I mean, he was already thinking south. So he just.
Well, what was he?
Well,
what
if
was
he
the
said
basis?
Dubai, the problem is that he's already against Muslim peoples. I'm sorry, he's against.
He's got a lot of business
I'm sorry, I
ties,
shouldn't have said that. He's against immigration of Muslims
Who
due
he's
to
not
his
in
own
business
ignorance.
with.
Okay, he's not in business.
That's
with.
my. That's
But
my
in terms of
personal-
immigration isn't people he's in business with. So what I'm saying is that he has to pick from nations that are doing well generally.
What,
that-
economically? Solely economically.
at a minimum. Let's just talk about the economic dimension. So you got Dubai and you got some others, and you got those Nordic countries. Well, he doesn't believe in a general immigration from a Muslim country, and he already stated why. That logic doesn't apply to those two Nordic countries. So you see how I'm picking it apart?
So there are no
I'm trying to be
countries.
as fair as possible.
There are
to
no
it.
Asian countries that
me
fit,
You could
personally-
say
fit the
probably
bill.
Okay, you could probably say
I
Hong
mean,
Kong,
Japan.
and Japan.
I mean,
These are all
why
places
didn't he
that
pick?
you-
Why didn't he pick Japan?
But that's
as an
why,
example?
and that's what I'm saying. And so for
Okay.
me, that's why all the evidence, I feel like, bro, either you walking and really, like, you really catering to your base, or you really, really believe some of this stuff deep down in your heart. Because he could have very easily said any one of those other countries, but he intentionally said something about two white countries. Like, you insulted African countries, South American countries, and you went all the way up to Europe. For me, I just don't think that that's just a coincidence. I think he is
Yeah,
a
I don't
smart
think-
man, and
yeah,
I just
it's-
I don't want to. Yeah, I just believe that I think he says a lot of dumb things, but I think that I think he's strategic. I think he knows how to trigger people and how to rile up his base, which is why he has one of the highest approval ratings within the Republican Party ever. Because I don't think that there's ever been a Republican president who's ever, regardless of backlash, really spoke to, I don't think there's ever been a president who said, well, we're going to institute a full-on Muslim ban. I don't even think during 9/11 they instituted a full-on Muslim ban,
No.
stating that all Muslims are, there hasn't even been, yeah, I don't know. It just,
Okay, I can. He's
what are you
playing-
pointing to that you
Uh-huh.
would say that Muslims are a threat right now?
So I can see he's always playing to his base. I guess that's a good distinction. That what you personally believe and the effect you're trying to get in other people may not be one and the same. We could say that about our own selves. The way we talk to people and the way we engage on any issue, we could say things that makes us acceptable to our crowd, and it may not truly reflect what we're thinking. And that kind of does go back to what we were saying about putting on the mask. That's a mask.
So
know,
how do we hold that person accountable? Because that's what I was asking for you. I feel like there's this foot trail, and I'm following the trail, and I'm like, bro,
Okay,
this ain't even a game. This ain't even a character
you provide,
anymore.
I think,
this
maybe
is
two
you.
lines of evidence that I could agree with. Well, I already believe in the transgender ban. That is prejudice.
Yeah.
But you're trying to paint a general picture.
I just feel
right?
like-
So that's one line evidence. The one with the Nordic ones, you're right. Japan, Hong Kong, those would also be great candidates to illustrate the economic.
Singapore.
Unless he's talking about, never mind. Those would have been good examples. So, or South Korea.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah, maybe that would have been.
And I would argue that
More-
there are a lot
more
of South
accept-
American
mhm.
countries that are doing really well also that he could have named. But again, I feel like I think the browning of America and these the senses that are coming out that America is going to be predominantly, whatever it is.
Well, how about let's
I think
talk.
that's an
I
issue
will,
for a
then
lot of people.
in light of that, because I'm trying to be as fair as possible. If he's trying to speak to his base, then obviously that would be more acceptable to name those countries as opposed to others. So you could say that, hey, you're not speaking to the nation, you're speaking to your base. Okay.
That's when no one likes him because he's divisive.
Yeah,
Bringing us together.
No dispute there. No dispute there. But are we not, in our own personal way, are we avoiding being divisive? So when we speak to people, are we speaking to the crowd? Are we playing to the crowd, or are we really conveying what we genuinely, personally believe when we talk to different types of people? Are you one person around? Let's say when in Rome, do as Romans do, but you can still have your same culture in which you're in, or the norms of what you're in. I feel like when it comes to communication, even us ordinary people, I don't think we normally communicate what we genuinely believe. There's many different ways you can communicate an idea that's culturally appropriate, but there's also reality of not expressing your idea and just telling them what they want to hear. I feel like if we can kind of really go back, when it comes to the abortion debate, I think there is a talking right past each other. I'll give you an example, and I think we illustrated it with the Trump thing very well in terms of how we approach the different lines of evidence. You'll say, the pro-choice person will say, my life, my body. Okay. My body, my choice, something to that effect. Pro-life person would say, don't kill human beings. Okay. How is that helpful? How do those little sound bites help? Really help. No one would disagree.
Context.
Yeah, well, the context is the abortion.
Well, but you were talking about sound bites. Of course, there's more to just that, right?
Well, that's what I think. Let's talk about that. So, when a person says that, if you know somebody is pro-life, right? Either you don't know what that means or you do know what it means. It seems like either way, it doesn't make sense to say to a pro-life person, my body, my choice. If you're talking to a pro-choice person, it doesn't really make sense to say you can't kill human beings. In other words, both parties already agree with both statements. The disagreement is on what constitutes a human life and what constitutes the rights of that human life. That's it. And it's almost like we intentionally don't address that issue head on. That's kind of what my concern is. So it's almost like saying, I got a liver, right? And I say, well, I choose to remove my liver, right? And the person says, you can't do that. I said, why? I said, because you're killing a human being. I said, my liver isn't a human being. It's a part of my physical body, okay? It's not its own human being. Like, I would speak to the concern at hand. There's not a destruction of human life when I take out my liver, right? I would articulate that. I wouldn't just repeat the phrase, my body, my choice, right? You're not adding any understanding to that. So I feel like if the one side is trying to help the other side understand where they're coming from, there's almost like an intentional miscommunication. And the question is that, what does it mean to identify the concerns of a person's perspective and how to speak directly to those concerns? So if a human rights violation is being claimed, then you need to speak in terms of human rights. What is a human and what are the rights of a human? And then on the converse side, you're saying, well, you're kind of violating my rights to my own body. It's like, well, again, same story. What constitutes your body and what constitutes not your body? Like, speak to that. Don't just make the claim. Speak and break down your own perspective in the lens of the other perspective. So communicate in a way, communicate through their lens, basically.
Well, I sorry, you were going to say something. You should talk.
Oh no, I was just going to say that. What are they arguing then? If they're not talking about human rights, what's being talked about? I mean, that's for me. That's a curious question. It's certainly, I would say, I would agree. It's not really posed as a human rights issue, because I even think of, like, when I think human rights, I think civil rights. I mean, my mind just goes back to that. But I mean, I don't think we're trained to think. I don't know. I mean, that's the bottom line of what I really truly feel. As you pose this, I'm like, dang, I don't even do that for my own way of thinking. Like, oh, let me try to put myself in the lens of this other person, and then contrast it or speak to it and see the differences of. It's like critical thinking. It's like critical thinking, analytical thinking, thinking. Like it's just literally the conscious thought. And I don't think that we're trained. I don't know globally what other nations are, but I would say in America, I don't think we're trained to have conscious thought within ourselves and how we communicate with one another. And I think that we don't think about those things of what is it that I actually believe, just in general. Like we were talking when we were kind of on break there. What do I believe in general? What do I believe about this particular issue, this particular aspect of human life, human existence? What are my thoughts on it? I don't know. And it's okay to be like, I don't know. I feel like that too about it. Like I feel like also with this PC culture and with everyone needing to feel that they're super intelligent and, woke, okay? You gotta be woke,
It's the opposite of being ignorant.
Exactly. And people don't want to appear to be, viewed lesser than and things like that intellectually. Then it's just like, it's okay to be like, I don't know exactly how I feel about that. Let me consider what I feel about it instead of jumping to, well, you know what? Because my buddy over here, my mama, my grandmama thought this way, or because I'm in this socioeconomic class, or politically, or religion, I have to think this way, and your thoughts may not align with any of that. Your beliefs, may not align with any of that. So I really feel like it's just we're not trained to think consciously and to think for ourselves, like not pulling other people's thoughts, but what do you think, and then being able to communicate with other people honestly, you know what I'm saying, open and honestly about these type of issues. Like,
so we gotta give them some space to even figure out their own thoughts.
Yeah, I feel like.
Well,
also,
I think the part of the problem too is that in most conversations don't start out as like just a conversation. We enter those spaces already with labels like pro-life automatically. What I mean, because you're pro-life means I'm not. Like.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. So when you
right.
say I'm pro-life, I'm already defensive, or I'm pro-choice. Then they're already so it's
even
about
the language is
moving.
counter-
It's the languages. Those are the barriers, and so that's why we versus us just meeting each other on an even playing field. Like, hey, what's your name? I'm so and so. Hey, I don't understand this, or hey, this is where I am in my thinking. Because I think the battle or the war starts when people are, or this arrogance arises with like, oh, I've arrived and this is what it is because I'm all knowing and you can't tell me. I can't be moved from this position, and it's just it's BS.
Yeah,
it's BS. All of it's BS. Like we can all be, we're all growing and learning, and so I think labels sometimes get in the way when we arrive at I'm pro-gun, or I'm pro this, or I'm anti that, or I think labels have done a great deal of damage to authentic communication and getting to the core of like what people really believe and why they believe stuff. So
and I think part of it, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Is part of it we get a little intellectually lazy and we want to dumb down our own viewpoints. to fit them in concisely. And maybe there is a way to do that, not dumbing it down, but there may be a way to do it concisely, but sometimes just because it's concise doesn't mean it's clear.
Yeah.
And so we might take shortcuts. Like I remember this is a very small thing. Like I was telling a person that, I'm a libertarian using labels, but libertarian largely
Oh, no.
politically, right? But one thing's like, small government. I said, no, it's not small government. It's focused government. I'm not trying to make an argument for it. I'm just trying to articulate it. And it's like the government will be focused on defensive roles, basically, and that's what they focus on. Anything outside of that, they don't do it for the most part, right? But focus doesn't mean small. Like if you're in a time of war, then you're not big government because you're in war, right? Anything like World War II, where the whole nation mechanized for war, So that's still focused government, but it's not small government. And when people say small government, that's like a shortcut to probably what they really mean. Because when you say focused government, the first question is on what? Focus on what? Well, that's a conversation, and that's okay.
Maybe
but
old definitions need to be modernized.
Give an example.
When you say like small government, do people? I mean, I feel like small government, to say that is such a 80s, 90s kind of, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's the way we articulate ourselves. It's what maybe the definition needs to be modified, or so that people can. Because I think saying small government has a lot of baggage.
Yes.
Just like a lot of things that liberals might say. It might have, or no matter where you are, words sometimes have a lot of baggage, and so sometimes when you hear that word, you're already triggered. There's no conversation that's going to be had.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for you to finish so I can say what I got to
Yeah.
say.
Right.
And so that's why the labels in these words, we got to understand. So that's why I was thinking, like, as you were saying that, I was like, when you said small government, I was like, I thought about the word small government, and I was like, not everyone, interprets that is, great thing, good thing, bad thing, whatever. But, so I don't know, maybe it's, like you put it, you said focused or refocusing, so that people better understand what it is you mean or where you're coming from, and might even side with you. Well, bro, since you put it like that, yeah, like I'm for that too. I didn't even know I was for that. You know what I mean? And it's like, so I don't know.
Well, I'm gonna piggyback on that. Maybe also because we do use these. When you said new terms, honestly, I was just getting bogged down because it seems like there's new terms for stuff left and right of like I can't even keep up with and then this and that, way or this and that, and I'm just like, okay, I think I know what that means, but not getting bogged down so much in the labels, like what you were saying. I do like the idea of maybe having new terminology, but I also feel like maybe you can get caught up in the terms, even new terms. But if we just express ourselves, I think it's just communication too. Also, if we just express ourselves better, clearer, and then we could be like, it's kind of like say what you mean what you say. But just be plain with it. Why do we have to be so highfalutin and
this is what I was just saying. This is what I was just saying.
And I don't mean like you gotta be. I don't mean the lazy part of what you're saying of being like, I'm not saying just have a whole mouthful of words and then it was just like, okay, well, what did you just say? It's just saying like, such and such a, and by that I mean blankety blankety blank blank. Like just being, you know what I'm saying? Like just being clear about what you're talking about, and I think that's a skill. I mean, I think we also need to stop assuming that people just have that. Like, it's just like, that's innate. Everybody should be a great communicator. No, like we have to train ourselves. We have to, and we learn when we engage with other people. Like,
maybe give some grace to say, this person may not be a good communicator.
Right.
So even though they're saying very precise language, they may not mean what they're saying because they're not skilled in communication. So we might need to have some grace in saying, you're being very precise, but you're not accurate to what you mean.
Yeah. And ask questions.
I definitely agree with that.
Ask questions. That's something that I'm learning too. Is just like sometimes you just want to be like, just to get on to the next point, or like to move further in the conversation, so you're just like, like, oh yeah, I know what you mean, I know exactly what you mean, and just to move, you know what I'm saying, or you think y'all are on the same page.
Yeah.
What were we gonna say? Or
I was just going to piggyback on that, but then also a lot of people are afraid to. As we were talking earlier about just being ourselves. We're talking about wearing the mask. A lot of people are afraid to look dumb, you know, and they don't want to ask questions, or they want to, or it's perceived that everyone knows what this means or should know what this means.
Yeah.
No, I don't know what the hell that means.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
and that's what I'm saying. So like when I enter certain spaces, I don't always, you know, I don't, and I feel like if you are a person receiving information, or someone's telling you something and you don't fully understand, or there's miscommunication, I think it's your responsibility to gain clarity. That's just me, and I don't always do that. And sometimes I got to catch myself. I'm like, all right, bro, you need to. But I just feel like, but to go back to what you're saying about like, you know, saying what we mean and meaning what we say, but that comes with vulnerability. So if people feel like they can't say, and that's why I need people who feel like they need. People that feel like they have stuff to say but are fearful of saying it. As long as it's not hateful, like I just want, like, say it. We like the world is in need of such. It's like long overdue for these conversations, but because people keep tiptoeing, we never gonna have these conversations. How long are we gonna talk about racial reconciliation? How long are we gonna talk about social justice? Have the conversation.
Right.
Like people so scared of ruffling
Alright,
feathers, so that's I'm like. I mean, I don't know.
So in the spirit of what you just said,
Yeah.
I'll tell you one issue is that I've seen this happen in racial conversations.
And I say that not that I've mastered it. I haven't. I'm still learning, but that's what I'm trying to get there.
So
You gotta
one,
make sure we have enough. You can edit this part out, but you gotta make sure we have enough space, because we've been going over 2 hours, and I'm assuming
might
they're
have
still
stopped.
rolling. You wanna check? Let's check to see if it's still.
Let me get up and stretch.
Yeah. Oh Lord, is mine going? Oh, mine's still going. 2 hours and 30 minutes.
But
Still
did
going.
they capture me? Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you. Not bad. Not when you move like that. Oh, you trying to lean up against the wall?
No, I was just wondering how
How far?
Because there were a couple times where I leaned back, but mostly I was.
I could still
leaning
see you
forward.
when you were leaning. It cut your arm.
Like right here, you can still see me.
I can see you. It's cutting part of your back, but I can see your full head, your arm.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see you fully now. Yep. But the thing is, I don't know how much space I have left. So do you? Because I had 40 gig. I have 40 gigs.
Usually it shows you a
Is
countdown.
that your everyday phone?
It
Or is
is.
that just
Oh
extra?
shoot! I should have done that. I just messed with the lighting. No, it's my everyday phone, but I got an SD card just specifically for filming.
Oh, okay.
So I had like 40 gigs left, but at this point,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to roll soon
I don't
anyway. I definitely need to beat this traffic out here too.
Oh yeah.
It's Friday and it's
oh yeah. Plus
The
people
game.
get home earlier on a Friday.
So
Oh, it
we're
died.
just gonna. Well, then I'm out of
I
space.
thought it was. Oh,
Did you
So-
want to kind of like a concluded thing, or is it just going to be kind of abrupt?
Well, how much time you got?
I mean,
I
like
got
5
maybe,
minutes.
Yeah, like maybe 5 more minutes.
Oh.
Like 5 to 10 more minutes. You could always, wrap this and just add some of these to another episode or something that's along the lines. But
That's true.
Yeah.
it's up to you guys, though.
I think we should. Yeah.
One.
We was going hard on that
One
Trump
question.
conversation.
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, he's the face of it. I think when people don't want it. Trump is a controversial person, so ironically, people don't want to talk about him.
I'm
Yeah.
saying
He's
for the worldview. I mean, he's a good example.
Yeah, he's the face of the inability for people to. He is the reason his presidency comes from people's inability to communicate across lines.
And
And he says you don't need
part
to.
of it.
He's saying you don't need to. You stay in your bubble, and I'm going to make it okay for you to be in your bubble. You
So-
can be authentic and in your bubble. You don't need to update.
You don't
double
need to
down.
grow.
You know, he doubles down because
Yeah.
that's a reflection saying you don't need to grow. You don't need to take in new information.
It's an insecurity. It's a.
It's definitely insecurity, but he's the base of it. He's like the embodiment of the problems
I never
that
thought
we
about
see.
it like that.
Yeah.
And that's why he's so wildly popular. That's why people they worship him.
Oh yeah, the man.
They worship. He can do
Oh,
no
yeah.
wrong to a Trump supporter.
To
a true
supporters,
Trump
yeah.
supporter.
The man, like,
He can do no wrong.
I mean, you look at the deficit. You look at. I mean, he's a spender. Republicans usually aren't spenders. Like he's. It's just a lot of.
He's not a conservative.
I mean, but it's just a lot of. But
He's not even
Republicans.
a Republican.
But Republicans are still like.
Corners.
You know,
Mhm.
I was trying to tell you. I did like this
I
a couple times, but you didn't see me.
Yeah.
You probably won't pick up on the screen though.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I just feel like whether you agree with people or not. I mean, for example, lifestyle or I feel like you have to enter those spaces and be like, look, this is like I want to be intentional about this relationship. I want to befriend people from that space. I may not agree with that lifestyle, but I want there to be proper dialogue because at the end of the day, like whether I agree or not, like my cousin, I'm not saying that I don't, but I'm just using him as an example. But my cousin, I love my cousin dearly. He happens to be a gay man. If he fighting, I'm fighting. You know what I mean? Or if somebody try to harm him, it's going down. Like it ain't even, if I disagree with his lifestyle, but it's just, I don't know. We got to be able to move past. I mean, I just feel like humanity has been sucked out of this, this world, and we've replaced it with pride and politics and winning arguments, and versus like, no, what's really right and what's really wrong? How do we coexist? How do we live in harmony? How do we agree to disagree? You know what I mean? Like I said, it's different when it comes to hate, when it's hate filled, or like, black people shouldn't be here, or white people are more or superior, or like when it starts going that route, then I'm like, all right.
So, okay,
like that's cool. Let's talk about it.
It's almost never like that, Frank.
But I'm saying
So I'm saying that it's always a subtle expression of what you just said.
Getting the shot.
It's almost like a subtle expression of what you just said.
I thought you
And
turned
so
that off.
that's my point. Is that you gotta go. So I just want to say what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
When we talk about race relations, here's the problem. The platform is that when whites and blacks come to the table, they're not in the same position of power, and people will point that out. And that then becomes a barrier, and then people get into what I call toxic identity politics, in which you'll say, well, you're white, so your voice doesn't have as much validity in this conversation because you're coming in the context of historic and present racial oppression.
Doesn't have as
system.
much validity as the people of color in that same space.
And that's normally stated in my experience.
But
And
is
white
that
people,
true? What makes
drives
that
me
not true? Though?
Crazy.
Well,
Huh?
What makes that not true?
Here's what I'm saying.
I'm just
I
curious.
personally
I'm not
believe-
saying.
I
just-
personally agree with it, but I know how them white folks respond.
Yeah.
And they go insane when you say that, unless they're like a level.
They don't have what they have.
They
to
say that's the most prejudiced thing you could possibly say, to say it because the color of my skin, which happens to be white,
Mhm.
I somehow is less valid. It's like you have, in other words, you need to
What is the
take
conversation? That's what
the racial reconciliation, race issues. Take your pick. So whenever you can, first of all, manage to get white people to be willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
You need to, I'm gonna be blunt, we might have to edit this out. You gotta coddle them. You have to coddle white people. If they have no experience on this issue, they've never thought about it, you got to coddle them and take the high ground and to slowly ease them into certain concepts. Let them speak open and honestly. A lot of it's gonna be racist, a lot of it's gonna be racially insensitive. You have to coddle them until they get to that point of trust and personal maturity, when you can start to then say, this whole time, we haven't been talking even on the same playing field. You thought we did, but you can't lead with that. It's overwhelming. They disagree with it.
I know.
And I'm saying I'm telling you, that's what I've consistently experienced.
Well,
And the same issue comes up with the LGBT. Now I don't have as much experience on this,
Mhm.
but I have some, in that there is this perception that that same dynamic.
Mhm.
So whether you agree with it or not, is something. If one party believes it, you got to deal with it. Okay. So, but the second thing, and we didn't answer this, I want to talk about the transgender thing and the misgendering, because. So ironically, we're talking about ideologies, right?
Mhm.
Fundamentals,
Yeah, fundamental.
and then how to talk about the ideology. What happens when one of the parties makes their ideology their identity? Then it's like you can't even talk about the ideology because one party thinks you're talking about the validity of their existence. Now that's actually an interesting question from a philosophical standpoint, but it's real
Mhm.
and it's spreading, and we don't have the communication skills nor the self-awareness to engage with a simple conflict, much less a very sophisticated one.
It's
When
only
it comes
gonna
to,
get
huh?
It's only. I mean, it's probably gonna get worse.
Right. So what
Or
I'm saying-
just with the abortion, we were talking about that too before,
Right.
about if when they say like a man doesn't really have
The conversations
a
on the
voice.
that I was referring to. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, that a man doesn't have really a voice. What he has to say is not valid in the concern of abortion. I would say a lot of the mentality is that as well,
Well, the issue is we
because it's a
live in
woman's body. You see what I'm
which
what I'm saying?
assumes a pro-choice
Which
mindset.
means that only women can talk about the issue of really
But even
of
then,
abortion.
presumes a pro-choice
Or
mindset
meaning
in
a
that
pro-choice-
the unborn
okay.
child is indeed a part of her body,
Okay,
which is not
well,
a pro-life perspective. So it's almost like you're assuming all women are pro-choice, which obviously they're not. Which is another issue with making that statement. It's a statement against men, and it's a presumption for women.
Well, we're talking. I mean, men are the ones that usually write laws and legislation. So, like for example, we with the ban that happened in I think Alabama, not Georgia. The first one that happened in Alabama. All of these. I mean, it was not. It was like 40 white men.
But that's what, so when you
And so,
say that,
like,
a lot of people
the perspective-
will say that's identity politics.
How?
Because they're not, because you're saying that it's inappropriate for legislators to legislate because of their gender and their skin color.
I think it's inconsiderate. We're the women. We're the women's voices.
But their voice was heard when they done vote for them,
Who?
these people, right? So we live in a
No.
democratic republic. So then you represent your constituents. If obviously 50% of your constituents are women, so then some percentage of those who supported you are women. So the women are. We live in not in a democracy, but a democratic republic. So the representation is in the fact that it was a democratic election of a representative. Now the fact
But
that
not
the
all
majority,
women voted for all of
Right,
those
and
men.
that's not
The
it's not
process is a
perfect,
process,
perfect.
but it doesn't mean that
Of
I
course.
voted for you. So then you tell me.
But the point
what
is
to
that
do with
when
my
if
body.
the concern is human rights, do you really care about the color? So it was all white people who voted to end slavery. Do you really care about the color of the people or the fact that the vote passed?
Here's the thing. So I want to say I'm pro-life. I'm pro-life until it turns into, or when it comes up, or when it's about, until it's about a woman's health, or until it's about the health of the child.
Okay.
That's where but right now, that's not even being taken into consideration. It's just full-on bans.
No, that's not correct.
Yeah,
That's
there
not
are
correct.
bans. It's
That's not
happening.
correct.
It's happening. It is absolutely
No,
happening.
You're gonna be extremely
It
specific.
is happening, and I want to say
There's-
the one in Louisiana is a 6 weeks. I'm not referring to the ones in Georgia and Alabama. What state is it? I want to say it might be Oklahoma. That was trending this week. I'll have to look it up. But that's what they're pushing towards. And this is all about.
So
A lot of people say this is about Roe versus Wade.
But that's a huge claim, Frank. I mean, I've never heard of any pro-life person who doesn't permit abortions in the case of the life endangerment of the mother or the a child.
That
is not even. I would say that's not even
What?
a pro-life position.
That is such a pro-life position, especially in the South. You have that child because
No.
yes, it is, because they use scripture to back that up. And if whatever is wrong with that woman, I've had a lot of people tell me, like I've heard people say, "Well, I trust in the Lord. I believe in the Lord." Don't you believe in the Lord? If you like, all things are possible through Christ. I believe God is a God of miracles. That is rampant throughout the South. You could go to them and
So
say,
how
like,
does that relate to, like, basically denying abortion?
them saying
when
like
the woman's life
making
is in
abortion
danger?
legal?
Time out. The most extreme conservative pro-life position that I'm aware of in common practice is you cannot abort a child unless the mother's life is in danger or the child's life is in danger, or both. Okay, that is the most extreme. Anything a less I'll say a less conservative. I hate to use it, but a less pro-life position would be saying, well, in the case of rape and incest, and or somebody would say, well, when there's a heartbeat. But that's less conservative when you make more and more exceptions. The most, I'm not saying that those people don't exist, but that is not even the most conservative, for lack of a better word, pro-life person wouldn't object to an abortion when the mother's life is in danger or the child.
I
Or
thought it was like that.
I know these
I thought there
hardcore
were
Christian
people that were like
conservatives.
abortion for no reason.
That is what I'm telling you.
When I was
They
growing
exist,
up, when I was
they
growing,
exist, but that's not.
when I was growing
They're
up,
not
when I
hard-
heard,
I'm saying you'll be hard pressed to find it.
Where?
when I heard,
Anywhere in the United States.
Go to Rockford,
But-
go to rural Illinois, go to Louisiana, go to Texas. I'm telling you, bro,
Okay.
hardcore conservative.
You send me you send me some literature on what you've seen, because I have never heard this outside of.
I'll send you
an
debates. I'll send you
extremely,
debates.
like,
I'll send you
fraction.
articles. I'll send it to you.
I'll suspend my judgment.
well, and then
until
I question,
see
and
it.
then I wonder too, is okay if are you truly pro-life if you're saying that somebody can die,
Well,
even in those instances,
Or you're for the death penalty. That's what I don't get. So like, you pro-life, but you okay with with
pro-life means you don't want to destroy innocent human life.
no, but you no. See, so if,
That is the argument.
where
A person who's pro-life, the reason why they object to it is because the same reason they object to me shooting you point
All-
blank. They object to the reason why I can't shoot you point blank, like right here, right now, is because you are an innocent human life. And for the same reason, they say protect an unborn child, because it's innocent human life. In other words, the location of the life is irrelevant to them. They're saying as long as there is life and that life is human and innocent, it is protected by law.
and they use
When any three of
So
those are not
contradictory.
true,
it's just I'm not saying you, but it's
this
just
is my point. That
contradictory.
pro-life, like you said before, it's an oversimplification. It's like, if you're pro-life, why do you support war? You don't understand the pro-life argument.
Well, that's why I didn't even say war. I'm talking about death penalty. I'm talking about. I mean, even
But the death penalty is by definition, it is for guilty persons.
But we use. I mean, these same people use scripture to justify pro-life or their beliefs of shit. What's the word I'm looking for? Taking care or preserving human life. And so they use the same. They use scripture to back this stuff up, but yet are for death penalties. I don't understand. I don't understand where the or like how can you be for one thing and not for the other? Why can't we just?
So what you're saying is
maybe they're using bad terminology.
Yeah,
Maybe.
You're interpreting it as we want to protect all human life. That's not what they're saying. They're saying we want to protect all innocent human life. So in the case of self-defense, those same people wouldn't have a problem. When it comes to capital punishment, those people wouldn't have a problem, because in all three of those circumstances, self-defense, war.
Then what's the difference?
So you're examining
I'm
their
talking about
religious worldview.
I'm talking about these conversations that I've had with these people who are pro-life, meaning I'm here to preserve innocent or human life. I don't know. I gotta go. But I just feel like, again, we see scripture and we use that to justify certain things, but when it applies to our beliefs or how our beliefs, but then when it's I I don't understand how the same people use or disregard scripture when it comes to other forms of human life. Like, how can you justify the capital
So you
punishment?
object to the justification.
I don't get. Well, this is what I'm saying. A lot of these conversations that we're having are about human life, and if we
Correct.
appreciate human life, then appreciate it across the board, and not just. And that doesn't exclude gay people. That doesn't don't exclude Muslims. Don't exclude these same people. Exclude these people.
All right, so I would like in a latter conversation, I would like to see who, because you're talking about a very specific demographic.
I'm talking about
of
the people that run this country, the red states, not Chicago. I'm talking about the deep South, red states, rural America, where I'm talking Bible belts, the ones that claim that they know the Bible way better than any of us.
Okay.
And so those are the people that I'm talking about. We're like, you know, the ones that believe in, you know,
religious right, effectively.
religious right. Or like I said, I've heard people be like, well, you know, there's a possibility. Doctors like, hey, there's a possibility that the baby could be X, Y, and Z. I've heard it. Mary, you gonna have this baby. I trust in the Lord, and that's okay. That's fine. But I mean, it's above the doctor's expertise at this point. So we believe in the Lord. We're gonna have this baby. I've been in some heated debates
Wait,
about.
are you saying that the pregnancy is causing a potential? I'm not
Either possible life-threatening or
Like a disability for
disability,
the child?
or like, for example, they had a kid. So there was a woman who what's her name? I'm gonna try to find the link. I think I saved it on YouTube. She was talking about her child had a rare disease, and the child couldn't speak. Is it a tracheotomy where you have the?
I think so.
And so she was saying that she talked with her family, talked with the pastor and everything, and the doctors had recommended, like, of course they can't flat out tell you, but they were saying like, hey, like, you know, this could be a really life-threatening thing if we go forward with this delivery for you and that child. And I think that the state that she lived in, it was illegal. She couldn't have the abortion. The child died, The child died on, I think she died on her 1 year, her first birthday. And she was saying like she couldn't afford to take care of the child. And it's like, so these same things, it's like, they're so pro-life, but when these kids are born into this world, where the hell are these people?
I have heard that argument.
Homeless people,
of the ones
kids
that are
starving,
like,
and
they
it's
just
like,
want them to survive, but then to actually take care and
nothing
raise,
about them.
and the money that goes towards the children, they're not there to support. So it's not just literally someone existing.
The question is that churches are extremely active in charities. So when these claims are made, is it that they don't support government policies that address those who are without, or do they say, I believe that should be addressed through the church, through private charity in the private sector? So a lot of times what I see liberals do is that they'll say the religious right are hypocrites.
I'm listening, sorry.
Yeah, the religious right are hypocrites because